Thousands of Marines and National Guard troops deployed en masse to crack down on LA protests as more protests crop up around the country. One official associated with the deployment said troops were, quote, wildly unprepared. California officials say they were wildly unnecessary. What's the end game here? We'll get Juliette's take.
I'm Marjorie Egan. Then we're opening up the conversation to you as LA sister protests spread across the country, including here at home in New England. That's in addition to this Saturday's No Kings protest. 877-301-8970. What does effective resistance look like, and do American protesters have the fortitude to keep up the pressure when facing down tanks and the full force of the U.S. military? That conversation's ahead on the 11 o'clock hour at BPR on GBH and NAPM, live from the Boston Public Library.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Corva Coleman. An overnight curfew has ended in downtown Los Angeles. The curfew area covers 1 square mile. That's where protesters have been demonstrating against federal immigration raids. NPR's Martin Costi reports the presence of federal troops is making the situation more unpredictable.
The Trump administration says it sent 4,000 National Guard troops and 700 Marines to Los Angeles in response to anti-ICE protests, which have led to some violence and looting. L.A. Mayor Karen Bass says she's not sure why they came.
We just don't know. And I think that's a problem with the administration, because to come in such a massive way and to make the announcements that all of this was going to happen and then not communicate it with the local jurisdiction as to when, what, how, why, is really problematic.
The administration says it had to send in troops, despite the opposition and even a lawsuit by the state, because it says local police weren't doing enough to protect ICE agents enforcing immigration laws. Martin Costi, NPR News.
California officials have filed a lawsuit claiming President Trump exceeded his authority by deploying the troops. Protests against the federal immigration raids are being held in many major cities. They include New York, Dallas, Atlanta, Boston, San Francisco, Denver, Philadelphia, and Seattle. In Chicago, thousands of protesters turned out yesterday to demonstrate against the raids. Chicago police say that at one point a car drove into the crowd of protesters. It's not clear if the driver's been arrested or if anyone was hurt. President Trump has announced the U.S. Army will change back the names of 7 military bases. NPR's Quill Lawrence reports the bases will again bear names associated with Confederate war figures.
At the end of the first Trump administration, a bipartisan effort changed 9 base names that honored Confederate generals over the objections of then-President Trump. In his second term, Trump already ordered 2 of those to change back, including Fort Bragg in North Carolina, named for a general considered among the worst in the Confederate Army. Trump was speaking at Fort Bragg when he announced the other 7 bases would again commemorate Confederate generals like Robert E. Lee and A.P. Hill. Hours later, the official Army announcement said something else. Fort Lee will officially be named after Private Fitz Lee, who earned a Medal of Honor in the Spanish-American War. All 9 bases will honor troops from the past 150 years who happen to share the names of Confederate figures. Quill Lawrence, NPR News.
President Trump says he plans to eliminate the Federal Emergency Management Agency. He wants to turn disaster relief efforts over to the states. Trump has named a panel to come up with a replacement for FEMA by the end of this year. On Wall Street, the Dow Jones Industrial Average is up nearly 180 points. This is NPR.
Good morning. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. Police in Worcester are investigating the possible drowning death of a 4-year-old boy after he was pulled unresponsive from Lake Quinsinemog late yesterday afternoon. Officers responded to a home on Bridle Path, a residential road along the western shore of that lake, shortly after 5 p.m. for a report of an unresponsive child. According to police, the boy had been found unresponsive in the water before being brought into the nearby home. Emergency responders rushed the child to a local hospital where he was later pronounced dead. Authorities have not released the child's identity, and details surrounding the circumstances of the drowning remain unclear as the investigation is ongoing. The incident comes at the start of the summer season when activity around that lake typically increases. Well, Rite Aid continues to close stores across the country as part of the retail chain's bankruptcy process. Court documents filed last week reveal the latest Massachusetts store on the chopping block is at Clinton at 1031 Main Street. Rite Aid filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy in October 23, then again last month. The second filing shows that Rite Aid is liquidating most of its assets in a fire sale. After the Clinton store closes, the chain will have 3 remaining Massachusetts stores in Fall River, New Bedford, and Greenfield. The Pennsylvania-based company entered the latest bankruptcy with over $2 billion in debt. Red Sox Rays wrap up their series at Fenway tonight. The Yankees come to town on Friday. 74 degrees in Boston. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include the Council for Interior Design Qualification, whose certified designers work to protect occupants through the design of code-compliant and accessible environments. Learn more at cidq.org/NPR.
Here's Jim Brady. I am Marjorie Egan. You're listening to Boston Public Radio on GBH and NEPM. Thank you. We're broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. You're going to be joined by the Governor of the Commonwealth, Maura Healey, on June 25th from 11 to noon. Hi, Jim.
Hi there, Marjorie. How are you?
I'm good.
Good. We'll start the show talking about the LA protests and Donald Trump's militarized response to them. And we'll take your calls on it. But first, we're going to be talking to national security expert Juliette Kayyem about those same protests. She's former Assistant Secretary for Homeland Security under Barack Obama, faculty chair of the Homeland Security Program at Harvard's Kennedy School of Government, and CNN's senior national security analyst. Juliette, it's good to see you.
Good to see you.
Thanks for being here.
Well, we're glad,
an hour early today.
I know. Well,
are.
we're glad you came in because you've been all over the place on CNN, and every time I see an interview, there you are, Juliette Kayyem. So you've been very busy. But tell us, I think what you said before the show was not a lot is happening out in LA right now.
I mean, not a lot that would justify federalizing the National Guard, let alone the deployment of the military, active military at this stage. So, yes, there is unlawful protest. There is arson. There is disruption of highways. There is breaking of a curfew. Those are unlawful activities. And that is why we have police departments, right? I mean, the idea that any unlawful activity that Donald Trump sees on TV is then justification for the federalization of the National Guard or the use of the active military is just absurd at this stage, because there's what is in between those things? What's your limit if you're the White House? Well, I see something on TV, I see a car burning, and that's going to be justification, or people are mad at ICE and there are protests against ICE. Look, it is unlawful to disrupt a federal law enforcement action. Those people should be arrested. But the peaceful protest is just that. It's just peaceful protest. So they are finding it hard to find a justification for all these bodies. And so my understanding is they're just sort of sitting around. They weren't prepared for them. So as the San Francisco Chronicle is reporting, they are sleeping in cots or sleeping on the floor, sleeping outside. Like
they're looking for bathrooms.
Yeah, they're looking for
no
bathrooms.
Food.
I know. It's just, this deployment was just sort of, sort of done without any planning. But I will say the most important differential, which everyone is talking and writing about, is of course the federalization of the California National Guard with the opposition rather than the request of a governor. And that's what I've been writing about. What does that mean? I mean, that means that you have no integration of planning, you have no command and control, you have no communications, you have no common mission. It is a recipe for disaster. And in the LA riots that everyone turns to in the 1990s as the last example in LA when the Guard was federalized, it actually, for those of us who actually study it, it was not a success. It was actually the National Guard that ended up being the better tool for, in that case, for a riot that was encompassing the entire society, entire city.
Here's what you hear all the time from people that support what's going on out there with the National Guard, at least, if not the Marines. The protests have not become worse, so it's good that the National Guard is there. Stop making such a big deal out of it. Better safe than sorry.
Well, actually, can I speak to that before Juliette does? I actually argued to you last night we should bring in nuclear weapons because that'll make it even
Proof,
less likely that
yeah,
they'll be.
yeah,
I mean,
yes,
really?
That's a win-win argument,
Yeah.
right? I mean, it's like okay, great, we were right to do this. Look, I have no opposition to the National Guard. If there's a reason why we have state National Guards is to support public safety, crowd control, all the things that have been done when the state National Guard is deployed. The difference, and that comment is sort of a sleight of hand. The difference is when you federalize it, they're reporting to a president who has no operational, or even the Secretary of Defense, no operational capacity, is politicizing it, as we see in this case. I want people to take immigration out of this debate, right? Because I think that's just like the bait. If this goes unchecked, if this goes uncriticized, if you just sort of say, well, good, there's no more riots, it is not going to just apply to immigration. It's not going to just apply to people who support immigrants or want to protect from ICE raids. This will then extend to pro-choice rallies. It will extend to criticism of the budget. I mean, the idea that there is some sort of limiting principle now is ridiculous. And for those who are supporting it, give me your limiting principle.
Well,
because if there's no limiting principle, then you get, then you have the militarized state that someone who just wrote that probably wants.
Well, there is actually a limiting principle that they don't give a damn about. There's a great exchange yesterday between California Congressman Pete Aguilar reciting the legal basis in which it is permissible for the president to deploy the National Guard. This is a hearing, and he's asking the question. You'll hear his response, too, from Defense Secretary Hegseth. First Aguilar, and then Hegseth's response.
Invasion by a foreign nation, rebellion or dangerous rebellion against the authority of the government of the United States, or the president is unable with regular forces to execute the laws of the United States. Which authority is triggered here to justify the use?
I don't know. You just read it yourself, and people can listen themselves, but it sounds like all three to me. If you've got millions of illegals and you don't know where they're coming from, they're waving flags from foreign countries and assaulting police officers and law enforcement officers. That's the problem.
The laws of the United States.
Can you?
No, the governor of California is unable to execute the laws of the United States.
All I can say is let's hope he was drunk, because there's no excuse for a dumber, less informed answer.
Choose my legal authority.
Wait, can we stay on this? I don't want to.
Like he didn't understand.
Let me read these again.
Question.
Can I read these, please? Invasion by a foreign nation.
Yeah.
Not.
Okay.
Right, but they're trying to say
rebellion or dangerous rebellion against the authority of the United States, or the president is unable with regular forces to execute the law of the United States. The reason, to echo your thought, why it's so important that there be blowback here by people like Governor Newsom, Mayor Bass, and real people, is because of the precedent this sets. And I think we're going to talk to listeners about it. It's a trial run from my perspective. If he gets away with this, every major democratically run city, capital D democratically run city.
It won't just be immigration. I mean, I
agree with that.
That's what they're claiming, that it's sort of, you heard Hegseth sort of, argument that it's the border crisis that justifies it, but that's actually not true, because they're doing it against protesters, and those, one might guess, or some proportion of those protesters are American citizens or lawful immigrants. So they're creating the crisis at the border. And I want to just be clear here: the hypocrisy of this group of people. At the same time that they say that they're being tough on the border, and numbers are, they're deporting a gazillion people a day, and no one's crossing the border, and Trump is fabulous because Biden created this open border, they're saying it's also a crisis. You can't have both. Either you're effective at your border controls or you're not, and you can't have it both.
Can I play one more piece
Well,
of sound
frankly, he
here?
has been effective at the border controls. I don't think people are coming over the border anywhere near the numbers.
Well,
they
Biden
did.
was very effective at the end.
At the end,
by the way.
at the end.
Yeah.
But that's what I wonder. I mean, I think
I will say he's not as effective as Obama was or Trump was.
Well, they deported more people.
I mean, the numbers are pretty abysmal.
But what's interesting to me is I think that there was upset with these massive numbers of people coming across the border. That during the election, people talked about craziness at the border.
Yeah.
They weren't really talking about, let's get rid of the woman that is a nanny to my child, or that's running the daycare, or that's cleaning the house. I mean, those are different people. These people have been here for decades in some cases, and often they're getting the wrong person.
Right.
The New York Times did a great blow by blow of an immigration arrest this morning and talked about how many people it took to arrest one person. They had the FBI, they had the local cops, they had immigration people, they planned it for days. They're there at 5 o'clock in the morning. The whole team takes 4 hours for one person. And they got the wrong person, but they decided to arrest the other person anyway because he had come over the border illegally.
I know how you can get lots of numbers of unlawful immigrants. It's a massive workforce enforcement, but he doesn't want to touch his people. Donald Trump, so instead he wants to touch the mother who's dropping off her kids, but he doesn't want to go after the
she
CEOs.
Got the 4-year-old getting dropped off at daycare. The mother was arrested.
Right.
Can I read a text that I'm surprised Marjorie hasn't read, because you are the best at reading texts that are based upon no fact. Here's Anonymous. And by the way, I would really urge whoever this anonymous texter is to please call us when we're taking calls in about 15 minutes. The subject of the protest is irrelevant. If there's a riot and they're burning the city, it needs to be squashed. Subject is irrelevant. There have been a couple of cars that have been set afire. This is because Donald Trump said yesterday the city would have burnt to the ground. LA would have burnt to the ground. And by the way, if you study the geography of this, if you've seen some of these maps, the portion of the city in which this is happening is like this itty-bitty square, and 95% of the city, business is going on as usual. I'm going to play one more sound piece so that people understand how real the threat is here. Secretary of Defense Esper, and obviously there was 1.0 with Trump, was being interviewed by Norah O'Donnell in 2022, and he's recalling Trump's request the military shoot protesters in the streets in D.C. Here's O'Donnell, and then you'll hear Secretary Esper.
What specifically was he suggesting that the U.S. military should do to these protesters?
He says, can't you just shoot them? Just shoot them in the legs or something. And he's suggesting that that's what we should do, that we should bring in the troops and shoot the protesters.
The commander-in-chief was suggesting that the U.S. military shoot protesters.
Yes, in the streets of our nation's capital. That's right.
And by the way, in fairness, Trump says he never said that, but this is his own Secretary of Defense.
And let us point out that he has just pardoned the people who were beating and tasing
and who actually did harm police
on January 6th.
Yeah.
And the other thing that texter said, that person should go to a few protests. I've been a reporter forever. I've covered a million protests, whether it was Seabrook up in New Hampshire, the Iraq War things down in Washington, D.C., all these things. It is the local cops.
No, I know,
of course it is. Local cops. And sometimes things get set on fire, like those driverless taxi cabs and stuff like that. Again, the local cops come in. So that person should visit some protests.
It is like you're sort of everyone who's sort of commenting or narrating it, or people like me and experts in the field, you're sort of like caught in between sort of two different narratives. And I think whatever you think about him, I think Governor Newsom is doing a pretty good job. One is that this is serious. This is different. This is a change of how we think about Title X authorization, let alone active military who have been deployed.
What's Title X? The thing
Title X, is
the thing that Aguilar just laid out here?
Yes, that you federalize the National Guard, as well as the deployment of active military. I mean, under what authority, we don't know yet, because they haven't invoked an authority yet. Is that this is serious, that Donald Trump has early on in his presidency sort of what I've been saying, sort of lowered the floor of standards by which these exceptional tools, no one's doubting that he has, at least arguably legal theory behind him, but they're exceptional tools, and we anticipate that a president will use exceptional tools in exceptional circumstances. So this is a very serious turn, and anyone who says everyone chill out, don't chill out. This is a breach of the civilian-military divide that defines a democracy like ours. On the other hand, your texter, Donald Trump, Pete Hegseth, Homan, oh my God, where did these guys come from? Steve Miller, all of them. I mean, I'm half the time I'm like, drama king. I mean, you guys, get out, get a massage. This is a city, what is it, 20 plus million within the entire county of Los Angeles. You're talking about 6 blocks, a couple cars, some disruption, a 1-hour disruption disruption on a highway. I mean, you know, if you think that's the standard of what a riot is or what an insurrection is, wait till the Red Sox win the World Series.
Yeah.
I mean, like if you actually, or lose the World Series in Game 7, you know, like, I mean, like, come on, you guys.
Look
like,
at New York City.
Look
at New York City last night. They had protesters by the thousands.
Yeah.
Once again, it was the New York City cops that handled them. And by the way, we should remember something called Occupy Wall Street.
Yeah.
That happened all around the country. What was it? 10, 12, 15
Including
years
right
ago.
here.
Right here in Boston. And you had some unrest at a lot of those protests. We had a police officer who became the chief of police, Bill Evans, who organized the withdrawal of that protest. They had all these down the post office squares, tents, and hundreds of people down there. Gave the protesters
his cell phone
phones,
number.
talked to them about getting out of there.
Yeah.
He talked about de-escalation a lot.
Of course.
He said the Boston police should not go out in riot gear because it was very upsetting to people. He was the king of handling protests in a de-escalatory way, and it was very, very successful.
I mean, that is really the point here, is that, you know, the government's obligation is to de-escalate from situations that might be harmful to populations, and that's not the guiding motivation of this White House. And just to say, you know, part of this is they are under tremendous pressure, internal pressure, to deliver on the deportations.
3,000 a day,
and they're not satisfying.
That's 5 times as many as they're currently deporting. That's a huge increase.
And that becomes the justification for why they're deploying the military, because they cannot satisfy their own stance, their own as regards these deportation rates. So this is, but the idea that somehow this is normal or should be normalized because we're just trying to calm people down is, like, again, this is not, and you all know, people who listen to me regularly, I'm not someone to be like, oh my God, the sky is falling. The sky, there are checks, the sky isn't falling. I've seen some of the polling. Americans are not comfortable with this for the most part, but you know, this is a line that, if not constantly criticized and pushed back on by leadership, by the media, and everyone else, will become a line that he pushes to extremes that we can't even imagine right now.
By the way, the fact we're getting texts from
voting.
people, and I'm assuming this is just in your hope that I will collapse before the end of the show, talking about how, well, this is like January 6th, and you guys thought there should be National Guard.
Oh, my God.
This is not like January 6th. Now, for those who say, well, as long as we're peacefully protesting, we really don't have to care, not so fast. Here's Trump speaking to reporters yesterday about the protests Saturday. This is the No Kings protest.
Yeah.
And talking about if there are protests in Washington while the military parade on his birthday, celebrating the 250th anniversary of the military and the 79th anniversary of Donald Trump. Listen to what he says the response will be, not to violent protests, but to protests. Here's Trump.
We're the only country that didn't celebrate it, and we're going to be celebrating big on Saturday. We're going to have a lot of, and if there's any protester who wants to come out, they will be met with very big force. By the way, for those people that want to protest, they're going to be met with very big force.
You said
and I haven't
that
even
already.
heard about a protest, but, you know, this is people that hate our country. But they will be met with very heavy force.
3 times in, 21 seconds, he says very heavy force in response to protest. Just protest. And my fear, I don't have any data because I haven't seen polling in the last 24 hours. I would say the average American really doesn't give a damn about this. And I think this so cuts to the core of what a democracy with a small d is. And I think the average person is just saying, when are the tariffs going to go down? Right. I mean,
well, remember what General Mattis said about Trump's proposal the first time around to have a big military parade? He was so appalled. He said, "I'd rather swallow acid than watch Trump's military parade."
I would.
That was his own guy.
That was a general, yeah.
I mean, I would definitely. You know, there's going to be all sorts of protests. I think this parade. I mean, given the amount of weight that's going to be going over the streets of D.C., which is like, 6 times what D.C. is able to manage, and apparently they're putting mitigation areas. Yeah. I am not wishing it. I'm just saying it's a possibility that there'll be sort of massive potholes and craters created.
I'm not going to tell you what Marjorie said to me this morning.
Oh, really?
She might get arrested, so I want to be careful.
No, there could be sinkholes, but anyway, there's going to be a huge burden on D.C. streets, and I don't know how many people will show up. But again, you're just torn between this is madness and really a sign of something bad, and what a pathetic human being our president is, that he is so afraid of criticism, so afraid of being ignored, so afraid, like he just, that he needs people to bow to him. I mean, it's like that kind of insecurity is a threat to our democracy. It is not coming from strength. It is coming from absolute insecurity. Double on this point. Homan was on TV talking.
Borders
talking and actually is like weirdly backing off on some stuff now. Like I was like, okay, this is too crazy for Homan, because apparently he might have said something that was interpreted as arresting Mayor Bass in Los Angeles, and then he sort of took it back. But he was saying, they're out there and they're like criticizing ICE, and there's like these posters. I'm like, honestly, man up. Like, you have like one of the most important positions in government right now, and this 18-year-old with crowns has like, I don't like ICE, and you're like, freaking out. It's just such an insecurity by them. But of course, one has to laugh because it is a little bit nerve-wracking.
Can I add one note before we bid you adieu? A lot of reporting is suggesting that Newsom lost his lawsuit challenging the legality, the constitutionality of what Trump did. He didn't lose his lawsuit. The judge said he was going to give more time to the government to respond. They've got to file papers by today at 11 a.m., and then I believe there's a hearing tomorrow on the merits. He may lose the case, I have no idea, but he has not lost his legal challenge to what Donald Trump is doing.
And he may lose the case, also like, you got to push back in every way. And I do believe this, especially on this issue, the sort of military-civil divide. I was going to say, if you want a bad day in being name-calling, look at my emails right now. Like, literally, I wake up each morning, just a lot of hate. But, this is the line that is very worth defending.
I'm totally with you.
Well, I think a lot of people get really excited. They see a police car getting set on fire, which should not happen. Obviously, it's illegal. It should be prosecuted, and they just go through. They want to just send in the nuclear weapons. As Jim just said.
There's a reason why there's 5 DEFCON numbers, because we don't get to DEFCON 1 immediately.
We've been speaking with Juliette Kayyem.
An hour early. Bye, everyone.
Thank you for coming in early. Secretary of Homeland Security under Barack Obama, faculty chair of the Homeland Security Program at Harvard's Kennedy School of Government, and CNN's senior national security analyst. Coming up after this quick break, we're going to keep talking about the state of protest in America. The lines are 877-301-8970. There's a No Kings rally this weekend across the country, lining up with Trump's big, beautiful parade and his birthday. Are you worried about safely protesting as there's been calls of the military brought in California? You're listening to BPR, GBH, and NEPM. We'll be right back.
Haiti's capital, Port-au-Prince, is the site of a massive gang war that's already displaced more than 1 million people. This pastor is helping some of them get back on their feet. We look at how some Haitians are making ends meet after escaping from the violence, next time on The World.
This afternoon at 3, here on GBH News 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And Blythewald, with big, beautiful bamboo birds. 6 sculptures in the gardens, 15 to 30 feet tall, by artist duo The Mythmakers. Blythewald.org. And American Repertory Theater, with the hit musical rom-com 2 Strangers Carry a Cake Across New York. The Boston Globe calls it clever, funny, and delightfully surprising. Now playing. amrep.org.
Welcome back to BPR and GBH and NEPM. Jim Browdy, Marjorie. We're live at the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We're continuing our conversation we started with Juliette Kayyem about protesting in America in 2025. You can give us a call or a text at 877-301-8970. Is Trump's militarized response in LA just a trial run for what's likely to come to a city or town near you. Governor Newsom out there in California says Trump calling in the National Guard and Marines on protesters is a manufactured crisis in order to distract from the administration's policy failures. I think it's much more than that. Connecticut Senator Chris Murphy is drawing attention to Trump's statement about his military parade this weekend. Trump, as we said, is threatening to use force against anyone who protests. The same day No Kings rallies are planned for around the country. Here's a little bit of what Murphy had to say.
If people actually do choose to stay home because Donald Trump is threatening them with violence if they turn out, then we don't have a democracy any longer. It's gone. If people feel like they can't exercise their voice, that they can't speak truth to power. So listen, it's just our decision whether we let him, Donald Trump, bully us into silence. This weekend, we have a chance to be out there.
So in light of LA and what's going on, are you concerned about protesting this weekend? Or more broadly, are you concerned, as I said a second ago, that this is the pattern of what kind of response we're going to expect from Washington to any serious protests, peaceful or otherwise, around the country? 877-301-8970. Can you make me feel better and tell me I'm wrong, that a lot of people do care about this and that it's not just a small slice of America that is deeply troubled by what's happening?
I think people care a lot about this. I think they care a lot about the tariffs that are throwing their businesses into turmoil. I think a lot of people care in general what's happening. We have a new in New England. Obviously, we're more liberal in New England, but even in New Hampshire, people are growing increasingly upset about Trump on the economy. So I think, yeah, people do care about this. I think Saturday is going to be a big deal day. I do. I could be wrong, but I think it's going to be a big deal day.
You'll agree it's going to be smaller than it would have been had it not been for LA, though. That's a given, correct? There are going to be some people scared out of participating.
Well, you know,
I don't know how many.
We mentioned before the show that the hands-off protests that we had, like tens of thousands of people in Boston, was oddly white, very white, and it was people like it was older, people 40 and over, very few people of color at all. And I know we talked to the Reverends, Irene Monroe and Price about this, and they're talking about, Irene was saying, well, we've done enough, okay? We're the backbone of the Democratic Party, let somebody else go out there. But I think it was that, and I think it was also people who were not in this country legally were afraid to show up, and I think that's going to happen again. If you're
a Latino and you're here totally legally, wouldn't you be concerned about going?
Because you're a person of color, and I think that's kudos to the people out in LA, because a lot of those people on the street were people that they were Latino, and I don't know if they were American citizens or they weren't American citizens, but they put their necks out there. They weren't blue-eyed blondes. Let's put it that way.
An anonymous texter says, "Well, the stock market's doing okay. What's for lunch?" And I fear that that's typical. Let's take some calls. Carrie, you're in Woonsocket, Rhode Island. Welcome to the show. Hi.
Hello, thanks for taking my call.
Of course.
I said I had two things to mention, but I actually have three. But first, the protest at the parade that I would like to see would be one protester just drifting out onto the road and standing in front of the tank.
Like Tiananmen Square.
Exactly. And if we can get a picture like that, and I guess with the planning, you could kind of flood the zone, and one person drifts out as the police are going after that person, another from the other side of the road drifts out, and a third one, and a fourth one.
Okay, I would say that person has a good chance of being a dead pancake in this country if they have the courage to do that.
Well,
but
remember
I hear you.
Trump was criticized when China wasn't tough enough on Tiananmen Square? That he was initially very upset about that.
What are your other points quickly, Carrie?
Okay.
Go ahead, Carrie.
The second question is, why are the members in this parade, the paraders, unarmed? Is the Secret Service worried for Trump's safety from the military?
I didn't know that they were, frankly.
I didn't know that either. I don't know that that's true.
And quickly, what's your third point, Carrie? Really quickly.
The Secret Service will be checking that out. The third thing is, I would like to hear politicians like Newsom and stuff make the point that the National Guard and these Marines are being put in a bad spot, but that he's confident that the U.S. military will never shoot an American citizen
Yeah.
Well, I don't know how. I mean, Kent State happened, and I'm sure you've read about it or remember it. I'm not sure you can make that representation when you just heard the former Secretary of Defense say the president said to him, "Can't we shoot him in the legs?" Thank you, Carrie, for your call.
You know, here's Pete from New Hampshire who says, while you guys are downplaying what's happening in L.A., a few broken windows and grandmas strolling around the Capitol on January 6th was the worst day ever history.
What's the point of that?
I don't
get the
know,
point.
Pete. I don't know what you're thinking. You're calling January 6th a few broken windows and grandmas strolling down the Capitol. You know that police officers suffered brain injuries that day by being hit and tased and bear sprayed. 4 of them died after that. And again...
And they're trying to hang the Vice President of the United States.
You got to go to a few protests. I mean, right here during the Black Lives Matter protests in Boston, we had broken windows downtown by where the Jordan Marsh and Macy's used to be. We had some looting going on. And again, the Boston Police Department handled it. I think you got to get out of your house and see what goes on in most... The only protest I've ever been to in my whole life, which was where you didn't have an underlying sense of danger, was the Women's March.
Yeah.
You know why? Because it was 90% women. That's why. Usually there's an undercurrent of danger at every single protest, and there are broken windows, and there is looting. This is...
Can I ask you a question? We only have a minute. We have to take a break, and then we're going to get to all your calls. I ask you this question about once a week. A text like that, is that to troll us and aggravate us, or do people really believe that what they're seeing on their television screens in L.A. with very few people, with a modest amount of illegal, violent behavior, equates with what happened on January 6th when they attempted to overthrow the government of the United States of America? And attacking law enforcement, as you said?
I think that, as I've said a million times, some people live in a fact-based news consumption world, and some people don't. Can
I interrupt? Because we're running out of time. This texter said, no police died on January 6th. Stop lying. She didn't say they died on January 6th. After they did. I mean, really?
Yeah, and one officer died from his injuries after, and several of them have very serious injuries. Anyway, we're out of time.
And there were deaths by suicides. We're not out of time.
Yeah, we're going to come back and talk about this after another quick break. You're listening to the Boston Public Radio. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library. We are always also broadcasting on 88.5 NEPM and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We're going to keep taking your calls about the protest issue. Right after this quick break, 877-301-8970.
I'm Jared Bowen. Today on The Culture Show, Adam Met. He is the A in AJR, the multi-platinum band. He's also a climate advocate, educator, and now a published writer. His new book, titled Amplify, is a blueprint for boosting activism. Plus, we continue our celebration of the 50th anniversary of Jaws with a behind-the-scenes look at the making of the summer blockbuster. That and more on The Culture Show today at 2 on 89.7 GBH.
Support for GBH comes from you.
And Furniture Consignment Gallery, helping to power the circular economy for over 20 years. Now accepting high-end luxury furniture consignments in the greater Boston area. Learn more at FurnitureConsignment.com. And Mass General Brigham. Their leading heart and vascular specialists are committed to providing breakthrough care to patients with cutting-edge research and innovative treatments. Learn more at massgeneralbrigham.org/heart.
Welcome back to BPR on GBH and NEPM. Jim Browdy, Margery, live from the library, streaming youtube.com/GBH News. If you're just tuning in, we're talking about what's happening in LA, whether it's a harbinger of things to come, what impact the militarization of the response under Donald Trump is going to have on turnout around the country and in Washington if there are to be protests. With made-up information, have the courage to dial the number and call us at 877-301-8970. And instead of anonymously texting, which you're free to do, give us a buzz and have a conversation.
By the way,
us.
I think people think it's real. As I've told you, look what's on.
They think that January 6th equates with what's going on in LA right now?
President Trump.
Nobody thinks that.
President Trump has said it was a day of love. He has said it's been terribly exaggerated. Republicans have said it has been terribly exaggerated, and I think people believe in that. I mean, the New York Post is making great hay of this. And Fox News make everybody afraid, exaggerate it. But I just want to say one thing, too. I didn't mean to imply before that peaceful protesters go and start looting and stealing. What happens is the protest starts out peacefully, and then some people who want to loot, who want to break windows, take advantage of that. Often it's young men, that are like 18 and 20 and stuff.
And whatever it is, as you and Juliette said, that's why you have police forces.
You arrest them and you charge them, and that's all fine. There's two different things. Murray from Portsmouth, hi.
Hi, Murray.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, thank you for taking my call. Again, I'm a retired Navy captain.
Thanks.
And I'm just appalled. Every morning I wake up, and I think it can't get any worse. And it gets worse, Jim and Marjorie. I just can't believe it every day.
What is most offensive to you, Murray?
What's most offensive is that the president federalized National Guard troops that belong to the governor of a state. People need to really wake up on this, because he's going to do this in Massachusetts. He's going to do this in Rhode Island and New York State if he can get away with it. This has got to get stopped, because he's becoming a tyrant. I just can't believe this. In being in the military for 30 years, that he's abusing his powers. So that's what I have to say. Thank you.
You said it quite well, Murray. Thank you.
We talked a little bit with Juliette about the cost here to the taxpayers in Washington, D.C. It's not really a wealthy town, Washington, D.C., by the way, and they're by themselves. They're not part of a state. And so the mayor of Washington, D.C. is trying to make sure they get enough money from the feds for trash collection and city police overtime, and they're not sure they're going to get it. And then each one of these Abrams main battle tanks weighs 70 tons, which is double the road limit that they're ready to absorb there in D.C. So they are concerned about the cost there and the cost of fixing the roads. And people have pointed out the Army's going to pay a lot of that, but the Army, of course, is taxpayers. So that means taxpayers are going to pay a lot of this on that day if there's damage to the roads. And as we remember what General Mattis said about the parade, that he'd rather drink acid than watch a military parade like this. Jane from Concord, thank you for calling.
Hello, Jane.
Good morning.
Hi.
A couple of points and a question, if that's okay.
Sure.
I think it's Trump as usual, which is opposite world, when everything he says basically is the opposite, such as that the protesters hate America when it's really Trump who hates America, or he wouldn't be trying to avoid the Constitution and make it a dictatorship and ignore First Amendment rights.
Yeah.
I also think he's the one who's lighting the match on all the problems. And the other point is that the Democrats should think beyond Trump, because after Trump, he's not going to be around forever. There's going to be all these horrible people that have done Project 2025. And imagine Stephen Miller running for president, just the nightmare we might have. And the Democrats are terrible at fighting back.
Jane, can I tell you, the only problem I have with your call
and
is...
a question.
Before we get to your question, for those who call us or write us and talk about after Trump in 3.5 years, you have to explain to me how we get through 3.5 more months of this kind of assault on democracy. I don't even know how anybody thinks that far forward. Are you convinced that we survive 3.5 more years of this?
Oh, no, definitely not. I agree with you. But I'm just thinking, trying to think ahead a little bit.
Okay, what's your question?
So the question is, too bad Juliette's not on later, is are there actually professional type agitators that go from conflict to conflict, or they escalate protests, like anarchist groups or the so-called Antifa, that you hear them talk about every once in a while?
I can answer that. We don't need Juliette. The answer is, of course there are. Of course there are. But
excuse me, have you heard of Antifa doing anything in like 5 years?
No, it's not. But Jane doesn't want to mention Antifa. It's not, I don't think it's Antifa. There are people who will protest anything that's going on. They'll glom on to what's going on there. I mean, I'll give you an example, Jane. And Marjorie and I are deeply concerned about what's happening in Gaza. There are tons of people at these protests with Palestinian flags. Obviously, the issue around ICE is not around the treatment of people in Gaza. So there's a situation that I think people can relate to, but there are also people who attempt to create trouble, who glom on to demonstrations. But again, there's no evidence that police forces, local, county, and state can't handle them. Jane, thanks for the call.
Yeah, well, Trump is talking about paid insurrectionists. It's always paid people that he's...
Like he had at his kickoff rally.
Yes, he did pay people to stand.
At that rally, he did.
At the stairway, he came down the
right,
golden
down
escalator.
the escalator, yes.
He's the only one I know, actually.
Well, that's why he knows so much about it.
But Antifa, that the right likes to blame all the time, has been oddly absent. I don't know what's happened to Antifa. Maybe they're on a breather. I don't really know.
877-301-8970. We're talking about whether or not L.A. and the response from Trump is an example of what the future is likely to look like, starting Saturday in D.C. and obviously hundreds of locations around the country. But what's the expression? He used very strong force. Is that what he said?
Yeah.
In response not to violent protests, but to protests and beyond. There are already reports in the Daily Mail this morning. Let me read it. Donald Trump is set to deploy ICE tactical units to 5 Democratic-run cities amid the riots. The military-style units are set to storm New York City, Seattle, Chicago, Philadelphia, and Northern Virginia. And Northern Virginia is mixed, but Alexandria is obviously very Democratic.
This is not to do with June 14th.
No,
okay.
This is just
in general.
Okay. And in theory, the point of this piece is, and then to be followed up, assuming there are protests, with military intervention. Let's go to Carol, who's listening on NEPM. That's great. Hi, Carol.
Hello.
Hi.
I am a native Californian, lived in Los Angeles for a long time.
Yep.
And I think people in New England just absolutely have no idea of the massiveness of the LA city limits are 469 square miles. And we're talking about 1 square mile downtown that has 1,400 people living in it. And then you're going to put in 2,000 people from the National Guard and 700 people from the Marines and the police and the California Highway Patrol. And, it's just think about cramming all those people in there with the 1,400 residents. I mean, it's absurd. And I've lived through much larger protests when I was there. And the truth is that 98% of people are patriotic, they're peaceful, and they're law-abiding. And there's 1% who go crazy and they throw rocks and taunt the police. And there definitely are at least 1% or more that are not there to protest. They're there to just use the confusion to kind of cover up their vandalism and their looting.
And by the way, shame on us.
Well, Carol's not done. Hold on.
Sorry.
I'm sorry. Keep going, Carol.
No, that's what I said. I was just saying, try to get a perspective.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Of a square mile in your town, and you're going to put 3,700 people in it.
Yeah.
Thank you, Carol. That was a great call. We appreciate it.
And what do we show in the news? We show the people that throw the rocks and the Molotov cocktails and set the cars on fire. That's what we don't show. People kind of walking along peacefully. And you could also say, frankly, on January 6th, I mean, not everybody ran in and started beating up police officers. There were people that were there to protest, and then they went on their way, and there was a smaller group, but it was a large group of a smaller group.
That attempted to overthrow the government of the United States violently,
Yes.
And
broke into the Capitol.
And by the way, in light of the fact that we praise CNN so often because it's our cable, your and my cable of choice, the good news is they have reported exactly what that caller did, that 98% of the city is perfectly peaceful, business as usual. What I don't think they've done a good job of, and I think it's intentional because they want to gin up interest, is they leave you with the impression that the protests are more violent, more widespread, more populated than they actually are. They're fairly small, and as the caller said, in a very contained area, but that doesn't suit eyeballs on a television screen. So I don't think they've lied about it, but they surely have not been as open as I think they should be. Let's go to Denise in New Hampshire. Welcome to the show, Denise. Hi.
Hi, good morning.
And to you.
I'm a truck driver, and I start work at 11 o'clock every day, so I can't wait to get into the truck to put you guys on the radio.
You are the best.
Days, so,
made our day, Denise.
You guys are the best.
Thank you.
Listen, I want to say, first of all, I am appalled at these. What is wrong with these Republicans? Nobody is talking about how the Republicans are not saying anything about this guy's lunatic behavior. This is crazy.
Well, can I piggyback on what you said? I feel the same exasperation you do. Last night, this is not around protests, but it's an example of what you're talking about. I've said this many times, but why not say it again? I would argue the most eloquent defender of what USAID has done for years, was United States Senator Marco Rubio. Secretary of State Marco Rubio yesterday ordered the firing of the remaining U.S. aid workers overseas. So, I mean, not only is there silence in the face of this assault on democracy, Denise, but in some cases, total 180s, total capitulation to Trump because they want to stay in his good graces and apparently don't give a damn about this country. Denise, we're really glad you're listening.
Did you use the word lunatic? Did you use the word lunatic?
Listen, I got to tell you,
lunatics.
I'm ex-military.
Yeah.
All right. I served in the Navy for 5 years.
Yep.
And I got to tell you, this is appalling to bring in the military for this little thing.
But when
and I'm a protester. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, when you mentioned the word lunatics, Trump is not the only lunatic when you think about it, really. You got him, you got Stephen Miller, who I think is definitely a lunatic, Hegseth. These people are disturbed. Tulsi Gabbard is another one who's rather disturbed. RFK Jr.
Oh, you think he is?
Yeah, it's like we have a bunch of people that are, Elon Musk that was in charge of Doge. I mean, you think he's a normal, even-keeled guy?
Remember what Barack Obama said? Elections have consequences.
They have consequences. So we have a parade of disturbed people, and I think, obviously, lots of people think, we have a guy with a narcissistic personality disorder running the White House. Well, I want to
Denise, that was terrific and really heartening. Thank you for the call.
Gavin Newsom. Jim doesn't want me to play anything from Gavin Newsom.
Juliette and
I were all in favor of playing something from Gavin
ahead.
Newsom, who's a little easy on the eye. Some people think he's a little bit too
what
slick.
A shock that you'd think that.
But he's running for president, I think, in 2028, and he's in this back and forth with President Trump, and he's filed this suit, doesn't want these military troops there. So here he is. He got all dressed up, put on a jacket and tie, and gave this big speech last night urging America to stand up and protest during a televised address yesterday. Here's a little bit of it.
At this moment, we all need to stand up and be held to account, a higher level of accountability. If you exercise your First Amendment rights, please do it peacefully. I know many of you are feeling deep anxiety, stress, and fear, but I want you to know that you are the antidote to that fear and that anxiety. What Donald Trump wants most is your fealty, your silence to be complicit in this moment. Do not give in to him.
What'd you think? I thought he was pretty good last night.
It was pretty good. Joel from Connecticut says, Jim, time to call up your Provincetown leather militia. I'm not going to explain that to people. I used to have a leather store in Provincetown.
Exactly. It's a leather merchant.
I don't know what that has to do with anything we were talking.
I don't know.
No, he was good. He's doing good. And by the way, Mayor Bass, who took a lot of crap for the fires and how she handled the fires, I think is doing a good job too. But Trump's brilliance is the ability to control. You hear him talking about deaths yesterday? The deaths. How many deaths have there been, as far as you know, that are attributable to the protesters?
I think there was a body found, but it's
and
not
they don't
clear
know
what the body.
Right. How many cases? How many deaths have they demonstrated had something to do with the protesters? The answer is 0.
Yeah.
But he says it, and it gets picked up, and it's just he is far better at moving popular opinion than the Hegseths, the Basses, and most of the other Democrats are. They just. It's that simple.
A couple of them are doing a pretty good job. There's kind of the Newsom front, and then there's kind of nerdy front, like Chris Murphy, the senator from Connecticut.
I think he's been doing a great job.
I think he's been great.
He's been relentless, which is the key.
He's been relentless, talking about what Trump is doing, talking about our move toward authoritarianism, talking about that when you are afraid to speak your mind in the United States of America, that shows that the authoritarian mood in the air is on your shoulder. What are you laughing at?
Well, since you admit you're superficial, can I be just as superficial? I didn't say you couldn't play anything. Okay, go ahead.
I am superficial.
I didn't say you couldn't play anything. Okay, go ahead.
What are you laughing at?
superficial.
Yeah.
Do you have any problem with Governor Newsom in light of the fact that he was once married to Kimberly Guilfoyle?
Well, he divorced
her. Who then
her.
went on
He
to
divorced
hang
her.
out with
Yeah.
Donald Trump Jr.
And also,
before he dumped her?
I'll be superficial and point out, look at a picture when Gavin Newsom was married to Kimberly Guilfoyle. Look at Kimberly Guilfoyle then, and look at her when she was with Don Jr. I mean, there's been a big change. I think that's probably what happened.
Still the same person inside,
well,
I would
she's
argue.
The same person. Well, maybe she changed, Jim. You know, maybe she.
She the ambassador of Greece now? Didn't they make her ambassador of Greece to get her out of the country?
Don's
right,
got a new girlfriend.
I know it.
Yeah, that's what happened.
Don Jr. has a new girlfriend.
That's right. They shipped her to Greece.
Okay, let's go to Ann in Lincoln. Ann, thank you so much for your call. We really appreciate it. We're talking about the protests, the militarization of the protests by the Trump administration, and more. Hello. Hi.
Hi, Jim and Marjorie. Thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
I've been going to some protests.
We have a problem,
it's
man.
really important.
Keep going. We were breaking up. Keep trying. Let's see how it goes.
Okay. I think they're very important, and I encourage everybody to come out to them, and I'm not afraid. But I want to say, over the weekend, I heard somebody on television talking about the Project 2025, and that in there, apparently, they set a goal of being able to use the Insurrection Act to impose martial law, and that's the goal that they're headed toward. And then I believe they can shut down all sorts of protests, no matter what you're protesting, how peaceful or whatever. So I think that's what they're going after. But if I could make a second point,
of course.
I don't know if you're planning on talking about it later today, but that speech that Trump gave at Fort Bragg yesterday
was the
most appalling thing I have heard. And I'm so glad Captain Murray called in a little while ago. I think he said that he didn't think the soldiers would shoot anybody in the leg. But what I saw in that speech at Fort Bragg, all the cheers and the people, the military guys and girls behind Trump, they were cheering and laughing and loving all the insults he was handing out to governors and mayors and Democrats. It was the most disgusting thing I've seen. And I'm so afraid that our military's been captured by him.
I saw the same thing you did, and that was my initial reaction. But in all fairness, those are all young men and women in the military with the commander-in-chief standing in front of them, and they're seated behind them. They know there's a lot of pressure on them, despite the wildly inappropriate authoritarian behavior of the guy standing at the podium. So I'm more willing to give the troops there a break because of the incredibly tough situation they're put in. But in terms of what Trump had to say and reattaching the Confederate names to the military bases, we're going to talk about that right before the 1 o'clock news, so stick around. Thank you, Ann.
Yeah, I mean, also, you think there's no draft now. People that join the military, I mean, maybe I'm sure there are some bad apples, but when you think about the honor and the duty and the willingness to go fight for your country, I'm a big fan of the military in general because they are willing to put their life on the line for the United States.
But don't you agree you're in a really tough spot when you're sitting behind the President of the United States, no matter what he's saying, and you have to respond how you have to respond.
Okay, here's the texter. I'm so worried that to keep my sanity on Saturday, I'm going to have to isolate myself with ice cream, my dog, and a lighthearted beach read because they are too upset about this whole thing. We have somebody else who says he's 75 years old, been protesting since the 60s. Trump's action makes me want to protest more. I'll be there, rain or shine. And several people are saying that because of what has gone on in Los Angeles, they were not going to go to the protest before, and now they are. Lisa in Framingham says...
stop there. That's interesting, because I asked you before, didn't you think the protests would be smaller because of the fear? They may be big. I hadn't thought about that. You may be right.
Lisa from Framingham says we should stop calling these protests. They are freedom-fighting rallies. We are soldiers in the army of love, says Lisa from Framingham.
I don't know if I go that far, but that's an interesting perspective.
Okay.
And again, by the way, for those who are participating in these things, what is it? NoKings.org has all the locations, and there are hundreds of them, if not thousands, around the country. And I'm not even clear if there are going to be protests and what they'd be protesting at this birthday military parade. You know that one of the discussions was, and the military is saying it was never on the table, but I read reports last night that it was on the table, that some members of the military saying happy birthday to Donald Trump. But in all fairness, military leaders have said that was never part of the discussion.
And we have a lot of our texters on the other side of the page who said that Black Lives riots are worse than January 6th. I would like to get some statistics to back that up. That's not certainly what I know. This is a good point. If you haven't seen it, you can look at the hearings on January 6th and look at those hearings on January 6th. They were mostly Trump's closest advisors that talked about
all the witnesses. Yeah.
That's right, who talked about what really went on January 6th. They were Trump people, so maybe you should look at those and watch where you're getting your news. Okay, we are done. We've been talking about the state of... I'm on the wrong page. We're done. Sorry to 8 p.m. up in the western part of the state. We're signing off to you, but thank you very much for tuning in. We're going to be back after the noon news with... Who are we back with after the noon news, Jim? I've lost my place.
My favorite parts of the show.
Yeah.
Some fabulous reporting from GBH around people with
secrecy.
certain disabilities who've been treated through the decades.
Yeah, I apologize for that. I was so worked up. I didn't get to my script fast enough. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH live at the Boston Public Library. Thanks, NEPM listeners.
You're listening to Boston Public Radio with Jim Braude and Marjorie Egan. Just ahead, more smart conversation about what's going on in our community. Stay with us here on GBH 89.7.
Funding for our programs comes from you.
And Maine Maritime Museum. Their new exhibit, Upon That Isle in Maine, the story and works of Chris Van Dusen, explores original artwork from the children's book author and his connection to the Maine coast. MaineMaritimeMuseum.org. When a compulsive liar confesses to murder, Detective Alexa Crowe must sort fact from fiction. You'd be lying to yourself if you weren't a little intrigued. So watch My Life is Murder tonight at 8 on GBH 44.
You're listening to 89.7 WGBH HD1 Boston. Online at gbhnews.org. GBH News. What matters to you?
I'm Jim Braude, ahead on Hour 2 of BPR, live from the Boston Public Library. A new state-led report shows how, throughout its history, Massachusetts failed thousands upon thousands of disabled residents living in institutions and then tried to cover their tracks with bureaucratic stonewalling decades later. GBH's Meghan Smith has been covering the story. She joins alongside Alex Green, Vice Chair of the Commission behind this report.
I'm Marjorie Egan, then it's Globe business columnist Shirley Leung about the legacy of Boston's late mayor Tom Menino. The Boston Convention Center is about to be renamed in his honor. Plus, the state of Boston's tech industry in 2025, and she'll weigh in on why Boston has 2 public radio stations. One of them is ours. All that plus our 2 More Things segment next on the second hour of BPR and 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library.
Live from NPR News, I'm Lakshmi Singh. President Trump is marking the 250th anniversary of the Army this week with a series of events culminating with a parade in Washington, D.C. Saturday. Yesterday, he marked the anniversary with a speech at Fort Bragg that veered into the overtly political as the president referenced a mass protest in Los Angeles against federal immigration raids happening across the U.S. NPR's Tamara Keith is traveling with the president.
Before a large crowd of uniformed soldiers, President Trump said the protests in Los Angeles were proof that uncontrolled migration leads to chaos and disorder, describing the nation's second largest city as a trash heap.
Generations of Army heroes did not shed their blood on distant shores only to watch our country be destroyed by invasion and third world lawlessness here at home, like is happening in California. As Commander-in-Chief, I will not let that happen.
Trump also decried protesters flying Mexican flags and said he wants Congress to pass a law to put anyone who burns an American flag in prison for a year. Tamara Keith, NPR News.
Parts of Northern Ireland are recovering from a second night of unrest. Hundreds of mass protesters in Ballymena torch homes and vehicles. The riots grew out of an initially peaceful protest Monday after 2 Romanian-speaking teens appeared in court for an alleged sexual assault they deny. Some of the attacks and the riots that followed are under investigation as racially motivated hate crimes. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says that, quote, significant progress has been made in ceasefire talks with Hamas. This coming after President Trump told Netanyahu in a phone call to, quote, wrap up the war in Gaza. A person familiar with the matter told NPR. NPR's Hadil Al-Shalchi has the latest.
This week, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu met with senior Israeli officials to discuss next steps of a hostage deal. A person familiar with the matter who wasn't authorized to speak publicly told NPR that Hamas sent mediators a proposal which Israel is studying. According to Israeli media, 8 hostages will be released alive on the first day of the agreement. On the last and 60th day of the first phase, 2 more will be released. The proposal includes 3 separate phases for the release of hostages who were defined as casualties. NPR has not verified those details. Ceasefire talks have been at an impasse since Israel resumed its war in Gaza in March. Hadil Al-Shalchi, NPR News, Tel Aviv.
From the Labor Department's latest reading, President Trump's tariffs have not yet driven up the rate of inflation as is widely feared. Today, a Labor Department report showed consumer prices rose 2.4% in May compared to the year before. However, the latest recorded month-to-month increase in prices slowed, 0.1% from April to May. From Washington, this is NPR News.
Good afternoon. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. A day after Boston Mayor Michelle Wu defended last month's firing of 2 City Hall staffers in connection with a domestic disturbance, 2 city councilors are trying to make a formal request for an independent investigation. We have more from GBH's Soraya Wintersmith.
At-large Councilor Aaron Murphy and Southie Councilor Ed Flynn are planning an emergency resolution on the inquiry. The resolution itself wouldn't prompt an investigation, but it would officially call into question the process that led to the staffers' dismissals. One staffer claims her termination was meant to protect top City Hall aide Segun Idowu, who's accused of inappropriately propositioning her in the hours before her arrest. In a memo to the council, Boston's top HR official says the council is legally barred from weighing in on individual city personnel matters. Soraya Wintersmith, GBH News.
As we've heard from Jim and Marjorie, more than 100 pro-democracy advocacy groups nationwide have signed on to hold rallies on Saturday in support of No Kings. According to its organizers, No Kings is a nationwide day of defiance from city blocks to small towns, from courthouse steps to community parks. The plan is to reject authoritarianism and show the world what democracy really looks like by protesting in peace. The No Kings rallies will coincide with that military parade commemorating the U.S. Army's 250th anniversary that just happens to fall on Donald Trump's 79th birthday, as well as Flag Day. 76 degrees in Boston. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include the Council for Interior Design Qualification, whose certified designers work to protect occupants through the design of code-compliant and accessible environments. Learn more at cidq.org/NPR.
Welcome to hour number 2 of Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan. We are broadcasting live. Thank you from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We're going to be back here on Friday. Mayor Wu will be with us on June 17th from 1 to 2, and the governor will be with us on June 25th. Hello again, Jim.
You've commented a couple times what a bad mood I'm in today. That
You're in a
first
really
hour
bad
made me
mood.
worse, but we got some good news during the break.
What's that?
News joining us Tuesday at 11:30.
Who?
Ken Burns.
Oh.
On the anniversary
great.
of Bunker Hill Day. We'll talk about that. Obviously, Ken's documentary series called The American Revolution is coming out in November. We'll talk about that. Obviously, we'll talk about the parade that happened Saturday, 250th anniversary of the Army, and a whole bunch of things. But Ken Burns will zoom in 11:30 on Tuesday. Across the state, thousands of unmarked graves hold people who lived and died in state institutions for those with intellectual and developmental disabilities. A new report has found shocking mistreatment, who were called inmates, by the way, I should say. Cemeteries that are deteriorating, poor record keeping that leaves loved ones effectively lost. Joined now by GBH reporter and editor Meghan Smith and Alex Green, vice chair of the state's Commission on State Institutions and a scholar of disability history. Alex, Meghan, it's great to have you both. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you so much for this really great reporting and very, very upsetting stories. And once again, the legislature not really doing anything about it, which is nothing new. But Alex, let's start with you. Tell us about history in Massachusetts, places like the Fernald School.
Well, thanks so much for having us on and talking about this issue, because I think it has just so many connections to the present day, and when we don't know the history of what's gone on in the state, I think we end up reinventing that past all the time, and maybe that's the place to dive in for those who don't know this history is, Massachusetts once had a large network of more than 24 enormous facilities, warehouses really, for people with mental illness, folks with intellectual and developmental disabilities, and we were a global leader on this. We not only built up that model, but really exported it elsewhere. At its worst, and it really was the worst, we had tens of thousands of people in Massachusetts with disabilities locked away for life in institutions where they were enslaved, they were tortured, they were abused, some were killed. And as Meghan's reporting has covered, what we found is that more than 14,000 of them were buried in anonymous institutional graves with just a letter or a number, often out of sight and out of mind. Those people who are trying to get this history have had an exceedingly difficult time doing so. And I do want to say also that while this seems like it's very far in the past, because we've now shut down a lot of these institutions, we have about 6 of them left, I think, it actually impacts a large number of living people. There are people, I'm always shocked, I'm in my early 40s, there are people younger than me who have experienced the significant abuses of institutionalization. And I think a lot of our work here is about why Massachusetts continues to hang on to this idea that the best way to look at people with disabilities is to see us as a problem, and then to say that the way to address the problem of our disabilities is to take us away from our loved ones and put us in places out of sight and out of mind where past is present, and we see again and again that we are abused and put in really awful situations.
By the way, people alive, not just those, some who were institutionalized. We're going to play in a minute an incredible exchange between a guy by the name of David Scott and Governor Healy right here, whenever March of 2024, a relative of someone whose brother, his brother died at age 17. Before we do that, though, Meghan, is it fair to say that the state has been involved in what I would call a cover-up through the years about how people lived and how people died in these institutions? Maybe cover-up suggests an intention, but I believe, based upon reading your reporting, Jen Moore's, and others, there was an intention. How do you describe what the state's done?
I know Alex and I have talked about this, what the definition of cover-up is, but I think the report shows that it was many factors, unintentional and intentional. The state, when they're defending this, why they're making the record so hard, usually cite patient privacy. And Secretary Galvin himself says, he understands the families wanting these records, but his hands are tied, by the law. So it's a combination of many things, and I think Alex can talk about too, but just the decades and decades of shame and stigma around family members who had, people living in institutions. It just, and Alex said the graves they only had a C or a P on them. It was whether they were Catholic or Protestant. Many families just didn't know where their family member was buried. There was just so much shame, when these institutions were open.
By the way, we're going to talk about what your commission found, but the legislature that Marjorie mentioned a minute ago, which in this state is where good ideas go to die, could fix this privacy debate in about a nanosecond.
Yeah, there's a bill on Beacon Hill right now.
It's been pending for quite a while, from what I understand. Can we play that? I want to, so people understand what impact this has on real people. Here's the man I mentioned, David Scott. Governor Healy was our guest. This is March 2024 during Ask the Governor. And he asked her if she would issue an executive order to allow him access to records about his late brother John, who died as a teenager while living at the Fernald State School in Waltham. Here's Scott, and then obviously Governor Healy.
Every time I try to gain access through his records, through Galvin's office, through anybody, they slam the door in my face. They tell me no. Those records were left in that school when they closed for all the vandals to get a hold about. The vandals know more about my brother than I do.
It doesn't make sense to me that we wouldn't make that available. Let's do this. Let's sit down and talk together offline with my team, David, and see what we can do.
My understanding at that time, the only thing he'd been able to get was the death certificate for his brother. What ultimately happened as a result of that exchange with Governor Healy?
So just as some quick background on that, David only knows where his brother was buried because someone slipped me a copy of the cemetery register with all of the names on it. The state would not hand that over. And so he went half a century with his family without knowing where his brother was buried, until I was able to show him to that burial ground. So that's what the lead into this was. It's really disappointing. I think that exchange has stayed with both of us, and I am in touch with David almost every day as a result of that exchange, because it was what he took from that conversation was that he was going to get a chance to speak with the governor and air his grievances and why this needed to be dealt with. And instead, he was given a card with a phone number. No one ever returned that call. 3 weeks later, he was sent an email by someone who did not acknowledge the association of why they were reaching out from the Executive Office of Health and Human Services. And it took him months, but he finally was able to get 100 pages of records by signing a document in return for it. But then months later, he got another email that they'd found another document. And at that point, I think he and I both really reflected on the fact that this in and of itself is an example on why this is an ongoing human rights abuse. Is this man supposed to spend the rest of his life every 3 months getting an email from the state that says, hey, we found another slip of paper because we're too disorganized? And if I can add one other thing, what was particularly galling as a disabled person myself, and so many of us on this commission are disabled, about that exchange is the way in which the governor was so kind to David's disabled son. And that photo op happens all the time with politicians, which is they're incredibly kind to the sympathetic ones of us who look good on camera. But the follow-through of governance that we need to actually have equal human rights is never there. And there has got to be some kind of accountability. That tab has got to come due. They have got to pay for that photo op at some point, I think. And so, no, he's still living with it.
And I think one thing I want to note, too, is that this past is not so distant. This is affecting people that are still alive today. I talked to one woman, Evelyn.
Evelyn Mateo.
Yeah.
Tell us about her.
Yeah, so she grew up... she had experienced trauma. She was misdiagnosed with some things. She was between foster homes and institutions. And she didn't find out until she was an adult that the Department of Mental Health did have records on her, and she didn't even know they existed. And she did find some, and she found the experience so troubling because she learned things like what medications she was on, what different diagnoses she didn't even know she had. She knew which of her family members, visited her in the institution. So these institutional records, while they might be limited and they might be considered medical in nature, they give people a lot of information about themselves. And Evelyn said, she had been medicated for so long. She wants to know the side effects of these potential medications.
Well, you mentioned in your story that she was misdiagnosed with a mood disorder, but it was actually the trauma.
Yes.
And the quote, I've got it in front of me, but if you don't, I'll read it.
Please do,
She said, I was mistreated. I felt like I was forgotten myself in society, which is devastating.
Yeah, another quote I remember she told me, she said, the government failed me. That's what she said.
Tell us about Laura Zygmunt.
Yeah, Alex.
Well, Laura is another powerful example of someone trying to get these records. And I think to step back to say what we found overall, whether it is an intentional or unintentional cover-up or an accumulation of those factors combined, is what we say in the Commission's report is that the state has weaponized patient privacy to protect its own interests. And so it has used the argument that they are protecting patient privacy to lock down records and also diminish the sense of the scope of this issue and act like it's just a few people when it's really hundreds of people we found every year looking for records on their loved ones and going to the state for them. Laura is one of those people. She did not know what had happened to her sister. Her sister was sent to the Fernald School, which was one of the flagship state institution for people with intellectual disabilities in the early 60s, and she died in that institution.
At 7 years old.
At 7 years old. And Laura never knew really what the disabilities were that her sister had, and I think her interaction with the state shows how unprepared they were, as she told the Commission, to actually hand over records. What she was given was a file that had 1 page about her sister and then about 10 pages completely blacked out except for 1 line, and nothing to explain why it was blacked out. And so she was understandably very upset at this. they had never put in a place to say, well, we're going to send you this record, and we should tell you there are going to be many pages blacked out because they're information about other people. And without knowing that, what this experience of dealing with the state does again and again and again is it re-traumatizes people, almost as a punishment is what it feels like, I think, as they've described, for daring to ask about their own loved ones.
But what did they call Laura's sister in that report? Do you remember the word?
I don't know if they had called her an idiot, an imbecile, or a moron.
They called her an imbecile.
Yeah,
which I thought.
I mean, we were just talking about how the language that we use that's baked into our own language is, it's the names of these original institutions can really.
Yeah, read what the name was.
The
word idiotic and others were in the formal titles.
Yeah,
names.
Feeble-minded.
Yes.
Yeah, these were common terms for the day.
In a minute, I want you to tell us what your commission findings were, what recommendations you want. I mentioned Jen Moore, one of our colleagues, also reported on a legislative hearing on this bill that's going nowhere.
Yeah.
And her reporting was that there wasn't anybody who testified against the bill. I can't even come up with an argument. I mean, you carefully draft something so that certain privacy rights are protected, but that basic family rights are honored, kind of thing. So do we have any idea why this is going nowhere other than the fact that, as Alex was saying a minute ago, there are a lot of dark things that they don't want to see have the light of day cast upon?
It's a great question. Galvin's office, when I reached out to them for this story, reaffirmed the same thing they've been saying, just that we think it's a problem for families, but our hands are tied right now, but we would like the law to change. And the Executive Office of Health and Human Services also acknowledged they said dark and disturbing, so they said it, but that's a question for them. I'm not sure, Alex.
Well, why don't you say what you usually say?
Yeah.
Because they're out 5 months vacation. They don't have time to take care of anything. And Massachusetts has one of the worst records of privacy of any state in the nation.
Yeah.
I mean, you go to Ron DeSantis, Florida. He's trying to crack down, too, and find out things easier than you can here. We're pretty disgraceful about
you mean
this
the worst record of disclosure and transparency?
Disclosure, everything is to protect the confidentiality of the patient. And that is 90% of the time in my reporting life, it's about protecting the ineptitude of the government institution that had them in. And by the
Alex,
way,
I want to hear about this commission.
I do, but just one thing I just want to mention about this little girl. They were experimenting, as you said, and traumatizing people, and apparently lacing their oatmeal with radioactive iodine to do experiments.
Yes. The Fernald School, this was a national scandal in the early 1990s, and maybe this is a good way to talk about the Commission's report, is that what this revealed was that the federal government, Harvard, MIT, and Quaker Oats had come together to work with doctors at the Fernald School to test whether cereal was nutritious. And the way they did this was by telling boys that they were joining the science club and then giving them oatmeal with radioactive tracers in it without telling them. And this was revealed in the 1990s. And I will say, and this led to why our lead recommendation from the Commission's report is that the governor issue a formal apology both for the handling of the records and the handling of the mishandling of records in these institutional graves, but also for the abuses committed in state institutions, stems from the fact that Bill Clinton apologized for this. We got a formal apology for these experiments from the President of the United States of America, but no governor, Governor Weld, Governor Patrick, Governor Baker, none of them apologized for this.
Why, in your estimation?
I think it goes to what you're saying about the bill, is we live in a highly litigious society, and I have heard time and again in the Commission's work and personally in my advocacy efforts that there are significant fears that the state will be sued for this. And as your colleague Andrea Cabral said last year, and I think this is correct, the only way the state's going to get sued for this is if they keep putting up these walls and don't take them down.
You know, when Marjorie just asked the question about what was being fed to these kids with no knowledge, it reminded me of a conversation we were having yesterday about the Tuskegee syphilis study, and there has been a torrent of apologies, obviously not under Trump, but pre-Trump, to the men and their descendants who suffered through this, but almost none for the disabled people who suffered through this. So what does that mean? That in the minds of the average person, disabled people are lower on the spectrum of those for whom we should have respect? I mean, really, I don't even understand this.
I mean, this commission, Alex, right, is the first time you think in the world a commission has been done like this, where the majority of the people on the commission are disabled people themselves. So this is all new, and I mean, as I've seen in my reporting, this is just this history is just so hidden and it's so shameful, but we just don't know about it. And one of the recommendations in the report is to teach more disability history, like to know about this, because. And I know, Alex, when we were talking, I asked you if you could compare this to get like other historic things that have happened. That's a good comparison, but I know, what do you think about those?
I agree.
Yeah.
There are comparisons. I flew to Ireland to meet with the woman who exposed the story of the Magdalen laundries there, and we spent a day looking at the mass grave that she found originally and talking about the parallels between these things, and I think that this has deep parallels. This is a national shame. It is a national scandal. It needs to be discussed and raised up, and I think that you're right, Jim. To a large degree, and we see this in so many facets of society today, this is because we continue to stoke and allow and tolerate and valorize a hatred of disabled people that we would not tolerate in almost any other circumstance.
Is there anything else in this commission findings that we should know about, either of you? Well, you were on the committee. You're the vice chair. Is there anything else we should know about?
Look, I think what we were asked to do by the legislature is to go investigate what are the issues that people are facing with getting records, what are the conditions of these cemeteries, and what should the state do based on these recommendations, and what is this history, as you're asking. And I think what we've come back with are 24, I think, recommendations that are basically the synonym for governance. We need the state to govern. This could be done by executive order if the governor would convene her cabinet officials, whether it's the Executive Office of Secretary of Health and Human Services or the Attorney General. It could also be done by the legislature, but we were asked to provide those recommendations, and I think we've provided very detailed ones about how they can work together to stop the mass destruction of records, leaving them in abandoned institutions for vandals to take and sell on eBay and God knows what else that's
Can I
going
ask
on
you a
out
privacy question,
Please,
if I may, please? And by the way, when did the recommendations come out?
They came out about 2 weeks ago.
Oh, so realistically, you need more time. We'll ask, when the governor's here on the 25th, we'll ask her about them. What privacy right can be asserted to prevent a descendant or a relative of someone who died in one of these institutions from knowing where they're buried? What privacy right do they assert? I just don't understand this.
Well, and you're right to not understand it. You have to suspend all forms of disbelief and get into a very bizarre legal argument that no one should have to get into, which is those are considered by the state to be medical records rather than vital records. Yes.
It's just what we do in Massachusetts in general. I mean, DCF is the worst example. You
Which
never
you
find out what's going on.
brilliantly in your columns through the years,
But I also want to point out, you've got state senator, in your piece you talked about state senator Michael Barrett, whose grandmother, who had 12 kids, spent 20 years in Northampton State Hospital, and says he can't get any information about the 20 years when she was absent as a mother and had to leave her children. So he's a pretty powerful guy.
Yeah. He, on the commission, he shared that. He seems to come to this with a lot more personal conviction, I think you could say, because he said that some of his cousins were asking about their grandmother, and he's like, okay, I'll try to find out. And then he also himself couldn't get records, and he's a state senator. And I also, I spent some time talking to Anne, who was the co-chair of this, and I want to share a
What's
few
her
things.
last name?
Anne Frack. Is it
Okay.
Frack? Frack, yeah.
Yep.
I remember I asked Alex, like, what does an apology mean, for you? And I don't know if you remember, but Anne, I asked her, and she just stopped and hesitated, and I could tell she was really thinking about it. Like, what would that mean to her? And she just said, it's late. It's too late. People have been hurt. And I just, I think that's important to remember, too, is that so much pain has happened here, and an apology is a place to start, but... And she also, she said, people's lives count. We should learn from our history and not forget it and not repeat it, most of all. And I think this report and the apology is hopefully part of that.
How do people get a copy of the report or the recommendations if they want it?
Go online, just Google Special Commission on State Institutions.
Special Commission on State Institutions.
It will show up right away on Google, and we have a state website for it. I think our overview and summary really hits those issues, and Anne is really our co-chairs. This is I do believe, the first disability-led commission of its kind in the world. And our co-chairs have been really fearless in pursuing these issues, one with an intellectual disability, the other with mental illness and deep experience on these issues.
One last thing, we only have about 30 seconds left, but is there someone particular with power over this at the State House that people should harass?
Yeah, call the governor's office.
Call the governor's
yes,
office.
and we really do need that support. And I think if I can implore one other thing, this state has a real problem, as we found in this work, with a dependence on institutional thinking, that disabled people belong in institutions. If you can let go of one thought as a result of this work, let go of the idea that these things are ever good. We cannot go back to this, and we have a really itchy trigger finger for going back to that in this state.
Thank you very much for coming in. Thank you for a great and very important reporting. We've been speaking with
Keep updating us too, please.
Yeah,
We'd love to have you
please
back.
do. We've been
Thanks.
speaking with GBH reporter Meghan Smith and Alex Green, Vice Chair of the state's Commission on State Institutions and a scholar of disability history. And we will keep up with this because this is rather disgraceful. Coming up after a quick break, new reporting on a scandal in City Hall. We'll talk with Boston Globe business columnist Shirley Leung about that and a bunch of other stuff. You're listening to Boston Public Radio and 89.7 GBH live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
As disasters get more intense, home insurance is getting more expensive, and many homeowners are retrofitting their houses, like strengthening their roofs, to reduce their risk and insurance premiums.
That's a big incentive. I mean, homeowners insurance now has been through the roof because of the storms we've had through here.
How some states are trying to help homeowners on All Things Considered from NPR News.
Today at 4, here on GBH News 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And Supermicro and NVIDIA, accelerating AI with a wide range of AI servers and the NVIDIA AI Enterprise software platform. Supermicro is committed to driving AI infrastructure breakthroughs with rack-scale innovations. And Dean and Hamilton with Compass Real Estate in Cohasset, a sponsor of the South Shore Art Center's 70th Annual Arts Festival on the Common, June 13th through 15th. Learn more at deanandhamilton.com.
Welcome back to BPR. Marjorie Egan, Jim Browdy. We're live at the library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Joined now by Shirley Leung, business columnist for the Boston Globe and host of the fabulous Say More podcast. Hi, Shirley.
Hi, Marjorie. Hi, Jim.
Hello, Shirley Leung. So let's talk about, I guess it's a scandal at City Hall. 2 20-something employees have been fired. One of them, a woman, was having drinks with a big deal in City Hall. So fill in the blanks and give us the latest.
So this is a scandal that erupted, I guess, almost a month ago, and where Mayor Wu had to fire 2 City Hall employees. They were dating each other, boyfriend, girlfriend, and the police were called to his apartment. And it's alleged that during this, domestic incident between these two, the police, the woman who called 911, apparently, the police understood that she was kind of using. She's like, "Do you know who I am?
Yep.
You know, I work at City Hall."
The Jim defense.
Is this really necessary to arrest us or to charge us and to, you just go, it's all a misunderstanding, and then, and the police were trying, the police asked her to move, and she refused to move, to leave her boyfriend's apartment. And, according to the police report, she shoved the police officer, and so then she was also charged with assault and battery.
We asked Mayor Wu, by the way, whenever she was here a couple of weeks ago, was the fact that they said that they worked for City Hall, was that the reason you fired them? And she said in the affirmative, yes, it was.
Yes. Okay. And so the City Hall, they were arraigned in the city, and then within a few days, there was an investigation, and they were fired, pretty much right away, and so they both lost their job. And then this week, the woman gave an interview with a colleague of mine, Andrew Ryan, and she said she feels that she was wrongly fired. That is all misunderstanding. She was not using her position to with the police to get out of these charges, and she the other thing that was new is that she said, listen, I felt pressured, to with Segun Idowu, who's the economic development officer. She felt pressured. They were having dinner, appeared to be flirting. he allegedly got a hotel room and was asking her to come up to the hotel room, but it looks like she did not go to the hotel room.
Well, Andrew Ryan has a text from her phone from Segun Idowu in which he says, I know you're not going to come up to my room, but it goes from there. So that's pretty much a given. And Mayor Wu said she didn't know anything, this is yesterday, the day before, she didn't know anything about this thing with Idowu until it was in the Boston Globe. Can I cut to the chase here?
Yes.
Councillor Flynn is saying Idowu should be fired. Josh Kraft, her primary opponent, says there's got to be some, I don't know what he's saying, some investigation. She, according to Globe's reporting, she didn't rule out an external investigation. If there was ever a case in the middle of a mayoral race, regardless of where the truth lies, for her to pick somebody outside of state government to do a full investigation here to find, isn't this it? Isn't it obvious?
So we should need to separate the two incidents, right? It seems on one hand that it seems that Mayor Wu made a decision to fire these two city employees for, I guess the investigation should look into whether they were properly fired, and some lawyers would tell you yes they were. It seems like they crossed the line here. You cannot use your city position to curry favor with the police.
But the woman the woman is suggesting that the reason for the firing was basically to protect Segun Idowu, and that should be looked into too.
That should be looked into too. It seems like that the city should say, did Wu properly handle the firing of the city employees?
Yeah.
Did Segun do something inappropriate?
And was there any attempt to protect him? Was that the real reason for? I have no idea.
I have no
where
idea
the truth
either.
lies. But that's the way to get to the bottom line.
Well, there's another interesting thing here about Mayor Wu says it's about they're using their city hall employment, but it's also most of us don't strike a police officer in the chest. If that is so, that is not correct.
Right.
To strike a cop.
Right. I mean, I think some of the questions are how they were put on, I believe, leave, some kind of leave immediately, and what has happened in other situations? Does someone do you get fired immediately, or do you get put on paid leave until an investigation is done, and then we decide what to do with you?
Okay.
But
I think it's time for a Globe editorial. Not that I'm in charge of the editorial page. You should tell Jim Dow that
external
we believe
investigation.
External investigation.
An external
to get
editorial
to the bottom.
too.
Yeah, exactly.
Actually, it would be good to clear the air, I think, from Wu's perspective as well.
And
Shagun's perspective as well.
And the woman involved.
And the woman involved.
And the guy who was fired too.
Yeah.
There
The
are
woman
4
involved.
players here.
That's right.
We're talking to Shirley Leung.
Okay, you had a great podcast with your colleague Hillary Burns talking about Harvard. Where is it going to go from here? Axios, the local Boston Axios, which I love, people should look at that all the time, is talking about how Harvard cuts could really wallop Boston's GDP, talking about the amount of money, the jobs that students and research and all this means to Boston. So give us your take.
Right. I mean, we've been writing for months now that, Boston relies on a lot of research money. I think we're like the number one, right? And in terms of NH dollars, we're like the number one per capita in the country.
We're right up there, that's for sure.
I think we're
per
number
capita
we're number one per capita. Billions of dollars every year in research dollars comes to our universities and flows through our economy, whether it's our hospitals or life sciences companies. So this is a really big deal. And I think this report said that the $2.2 billion in federal research cuts could deal a $2.9 billion blow to the Boston metro area's GDP and affect up to 15,000 jobs. And I believe it. I mean, you won't see the effects for a while, but I believe it, because think about how our economy is so interconnected with these research dollars going to the university, to the hospitals, and to life sciences, and then we have a ton of international students here too, and think about all the money that they bring in. They spend, they live here, and then not only them, but then their families coming here to visit
hotels,
them.
Restaurants,
exactly,
clothing, retail.
So it's huge, and so I think everybody right now is kind of bracing for impact.
So, were you at this the Globe Tech?
Globe Tech Summit yesterday was our.
What was that again?
So it's our 4th year. We kind of we do this annual list, 4 years in a row, celebrating kind of
the top tech companies.
Yeah,
right.
top power
okay.
leaders and players. But this was the first time where we had an event. We had an all-day summit in downtown Boston, and our last speaker of the day was Governor Maura Healey.
Oh, well, that's what I wanted to talk about. The Globe reporting on this, her speech, says, I think she was asked the question about the millionaire's tax, and which you and I have debated many times. I don't know if you're aware the people voted for it. It's now in the Constitution. And Healey, correct me if I'm being unfair, basically said, I'm willing to look at some modification of this. And I guess I know she knows this. I would say to the governor, not only do people vote for this, it's in the Constitution. The legislature can't change this. If they want to change it, they got to start a whole long process. And the second thing is, well, the governor, you'll tell me if she said this, may be concerned about the alleged, that's the critical word, alleged impact on the location behavior of really rich people. I'm sure she was very happy when the $2 billion from the tax was spent on education and transportation. So what is the point? We should get rid of the tax but keep spending on all I'm serious. I'm totally befuddled by this comment.
So she was the last speaker at our summit. She was doing a fireside chat with my colleague Josh Miller, the former politics editor.
Sure.
And as you know, when you do these interviews, you're like, how can we create news? And we're like, let's ask her about the millionaire's tax. And we're like, and we didn't expect her to. We didn't expect her to say anything. We were like, let's see if she says anything interesting.
I'm surprised.
And we were shocked. We were like, wow, she was open to the idea of undoing the millionaire's tax because she's looking at all the number of the people leaving Massachusetts. But she didn't provide any details, like how exactly would you do that? Because it is in the Constitution. But she is worried about it. She is worried about the impact ultimately on.
Even though there's no proof, you and I have had this discussion a dozen times that there's this mass exodus of people making more than $1 million a year. And again, even if you don't like the source of the revenue, and even if you don't care that the public voted for it, it's funding things that you'd have no money to fund. And the notion that you would relook at it, whoever you are, legislators, governor, when you're about to suffer massive cuts from the federal government is unbelievable to me. So why do you think I assume she said it because she believes it. Was that just, I assume there are a lot of people paying the millionaire's tax in the room?
There are.
Okay.
It was about 200 people, and then probably, hundreds of people more online. But also, if you think about, particularly if you founded a company, right, you made a lot of money. If you're a tech startup, you're a founder, I'm thinking after you make your money, you probably want to go to New Hampshire or Florida where there are no income taxes. So, but we're glad the governor came, and we one of the themes of the conference was about AI, right? And so
what'd she say about that?
And so Josh asked her, when was the last time you used ChatGPT?
Oh, that's a great question.
And I think it was like, I think she might use it for speech writing, but I think she was helping like a stepson with her homework or something like that. So, but she does use it. It sounds like she is checking out ChatGPT just like the rest of us.
Are you doing a follow-up column on the millionaire's tax since you're obsessed with it?
I don't know. I might.
Okay.
I might. Well, actually, it's like, how would you undo it?
You have to start the constitutional process.
Is that the only way?
All over again. It's in the Constitution.
Yeah.
And what you have to do, since it's in the Constitution, you have to amend the Constitution.
You couldn't do a workaround?
No. Because one of the reasons you can't do a workaround to relieve the burden on wealthy people is because, as I think we all know, this state was the only state in the country until this constitutional amendment that had a totally flat tax. So you couldn't create a benefit without violating the Constitution that benefited the wealthy, thankfully, or even benefited the poor,
Jim is in
by
his
the way.
wheelhouse.
He is
the graduated income tax man. And I remember that. How'd that do, 70-20 or something like that?
Well, I did right before this effort.
When is the governor on it
in
next?
the mid-'90s, I did...
He's a tax man,
I
Shirley.
did the fourth or fifth effort to amend the Constitution. not to amend the Constitution, to amend the Constitution, to change the law on the graduated income tax, and we lost by a narrow 71-29 margin. So we only lost by 42 points.
That's right.
In any case, and these people did a brilliant job, and the voters of Massachusetts said yes. So there we are.
We have the governor on the 25th, by the way.
I know. We'll ask her about it.
So we can ask her about it.
Yeah.
Okay, Shirley Leung. So Jill Abramson, who is the first woman editor of the New York Times, she used to run the place, and she's been a great reporter for years and teaches journalism now at Northeastern, and she writes for the Globe from time to time. She thinks, and I'm going to have nothing to say about this whatsoever.
That's two of us.
Yeah, we need to have we don't need to have two public radio stations in Boston. Of course, WBUR, they have a great place up on Commonwealth Avenue that she talks about their city space. I think, what does she call it? She calls it some kind of
Crystal Palace.
Crystal
Palace. I love that.
Yeah. And
that
we,
term.
of course, have this magnificent place here, right here at the Boston Public Library. And
they decided to build their palace in the suburbs, and we're in downtown.
They're
That's
in the suburbs. That's
exactly.
right.
They're not in the suburbs.
Yeah. Where do you park up there? I'm not sure if there's any place to park.
Let's get to the point here. Go ahead.
The point is,
so how are we going to talk about this if you're not talking about it?
You're going to talk about it.
I'm going to talk
What was
about
your
it.
reaction?
yeah, I mean,
It's not the first time I've heard this.
It's not the first time.
Yeah, this has been long discussed, I guess, in media circles, especially since when WBR, they had some deep layoffs and cuts, right? I don't know if it was a couple years ago or recently.
Last year, yeah.
And then now GBH has
We've had 2 rounds.
2 rounds of cuts.
Yes,
and so I
which
think
is
this
very
idea
upsetting.
is why does Boston need 2 NPR stations? And it's been a relatively new phenomenon, right?
There are only, what did she say, there are 4 cities that have
Well, we used
2?
to be, GBH used to be mostly music. We weren't a news, we weren't a news operation.
Right. So, and it's a fairly new phenomenon, but it's been wildly successful, right?
Which?
I mean, the idea of having 2.
We're both doing very well.
Both doing very well. You've grown the market, and so, I think you guys should still, I think I don't know, I like having 2 stations in town.
I want to point out, what do we call it? What do we call it? What do they call BUR stations? It's the Crystal Palace or the Grand, whatever it is?
Yeah.
Okay, they're Crystal Palace. I would like to point out, Jimmy, you just reminded me, that Jim, at the Crystal Palace, they do need tickets and RSVP.
They really do, actually.
To go there. You don't have to get anything.
But
People
not
can just show up here at the library. You can stay for as little as long as you want. You got the Newsfeed Cafe over there. You can take the tea. There's all these
now I
parking
know why
garages
you guys
over
wanted to talk about this. It was to toot your own horn.
Yeah. Look at the floor-to-ceiling glass. I mean, it's spectacular.
But you guys have this. I know this has happened to more than one guest. I mean, the one advantage of having just one NPR station is that you won't confuse your guests.
That's
I mean,
right.
how many times has that you booked a guest at GBH and they showed up at WBUR and they're like running over here? I showed up at the wrong place.
Or I get mail, Marjorie Egan at WBUR.
Oh, right.
Yeah, that's pretty funny too.
By
I didn't mention the tea room right down the hall here, the beautiful courtyard.
I don't think GBH is in charge of that. That's the
I just
Boston Public
it's
Library.
It's a complete experience. I mean,
Yeah,
this is one of
it's
the
a
great
complete
libraries in the United
experience.
States of America.
Such a setup. Now I know why you guys wanted to talk about this.
No,
like, really?
actually, the other thing we wanted to say, it's not either Monday or Tuesday, our boss, Susan Goldberg, who runs the whole deal here.
Yes, she's going to join us.
President and CEO of GBH is going to join us on the radio, primarily to talk about what's going on in Washington. And the vote could have happened as early as yesterday in the House. It did not, in terms of defunding the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, which means PBS and NPR. Could happen today. I don't know when. Right. But we'll also obviously talk to her about this merger situation.
And she has talked about, I mean, Jill quoted Susan Goldberg. She's talking, she's like, I don't see any reason why Boston, a place like Boston, oh my gosh, the smartest people in the world can't support 2 wonderful news organizations like BUR and
Well,
GBH.
while I'm not taking a position, I understand that was her position. I don't know if it's still her position in light of the threats
this
that
was
are
before,
coming from
this is before,
Washington.
Right.
And by the way, let me just say, because people act, we go out of our way. BUR does some fabulous reporting.
They have a great news department.
We go out of our way to cite anytime we cite their work. They apparently are terrorized about mentioning reporting that comes from GBH.
Nope.
But we believe it's a responsible thing to
Here
mention.
now, I occasionally see Robin Young at Hot Yoga.
You know what?
We're very friendly.
I spoke to her yesterday. That's our
right.
competitor.
That's right. She's a wonderful news person.
She said hi to you.
How is her hot yoga?
Her hot yoga is great, but I tell you what she's got. She's got one of the great voices I mean,
she does.
Well,
She
she's
does have a
also
really
really
great voice.
talented.
I've kind of
news
given
person.
up on the voice department.
Okay. Okay.
You know, you got to be what you got to be. You know what I mean?
No, I don't know what you mean. Now, a couple more things here. Two people who all of us knew are about to get memorialized.
Yes.
Tom Menino, you'll tell us what's going to happen
Right.
to, well, we know what happened to him, but where his name may be attached. And one of the truly amazing characters that has ever existed here, Jack Connors, formerly of Hill Holliday, the advertising firm, who in many minds became the de facto governor of Massachusetts in his later years. Tell us what's going on both those fronts.
So Tom Menino, the late mayor of Boston, longest serving mayor of Boston, I think, was it 20 years?
20-some years, I think. Yeah.
20-some years. And they're going to rename the giant convention center in South Boston.
Which happened on his watch.
It happened on his watch. And he also was such a champion of the Seaport District back when it was just dusty parking lots.
Yeah.
I mean, he really wanted that to be his legacy, that this would be a new neighborhood of Boston. And it has become that. So they're going to rename right now it's just called the, Boston Convention and Exhibition Center, BCEC. It will be now called the Thomas Michael Menino Convention and Exhibition Center. I've always wondered why there wasn't a signature naming for Menino, but this is it. This is as big as it gets.
What's happening on the Jack Connors front?
So Jack Connors passed away from cancer about a year ago, maybe last summer, and he was quite the man about town. Everybody knew Jack, and Jack was really towards the end of his life, he was a philanthropist first. He raised a lot of money for good. Of course, Camp Harborview is his baby. It's every summer, hundreds of Boston Public Schools kids get to go to camp for free on a beautiful island in the Boston Harbor. And he's been raising money like gangbusters
for almost everything, including Camp Harbor. I don't know if I've ever told you the story.
Anyways, let me finish. He's getting a statue that we should mention. He's getting a bronze statue.
Hancock.
Yeah, right. But with a bronze statue sitting on a bench with one arm outstretched.
Right, on a bench. And the thing is, his family office for a long time was at the top of the John Hancock.
You visited him there.
Yes.
I did. It was spectacular. I didn't realize that was his office, and I stepped out, and it was like almost the whole thing. And you know something else? He was one of the first big deal people in Boston to say that the Boston Globe was right. We had a terrible pre-scandal.
That's a very good point.
That's right.
And he was a guy that went to Mass every day, and yet he criticized the Catholic Church when they deserved to get criticized.
So when he would call our radio show, when we were on commercial radio, do you have any recollection of how he referred to me?
He called Jim the Hebrew Hammer.
What? I never heard that. That's hilarious.
And by the way, it was meant, I think...
Sounds like something Jack would say.
I think it was... I did not take offense, I should say. I think it was said lovingly. Is that a fair statement on your part?
Yes, he did. He was very charming and very funny. And
he was an ad man.
And I also remember when he did have his funeral, people, including myself, waited like 3 and 4 hours to get into the wake, which is widow stood... And she's not a young woman. And they didn't let anybody in, special people, like Senator Kerry. He was waiting in line.
They let him in, but they had to wait in line.
Yeah, they didn't have a special thing. And Joe Kennedy, the former congressman, he was in line there. Like big wigs, they all waited like everybody else. And the grandchildren would occasionally come out and ask people how they were doing, if they needed any water or anything like that.
Can I tell a story that unites the two of them? You mentioned Camp Harborview. Tom Menino was on our show one day, and he invited both of us to go to Camp Harborview. Marjorie couldn't go, so I drove out with him one day. And a couple of incredible things. One, almost every little kid, and I mean little kids, called him Tom. Knew who he was, seen him before, called him Tom. And one of the most touching things about how important this was, I spoke to some kids because I wanted to come back to the show the next day and say I'd spoken to single-digit kids. And I can't tell you how many of them lived a mile or less from Boston Harbor and had never seen the water in their whole lives until Jack raised the money. And with Menino's help, John Fish from Suffolk Construction and a bunch of other really philanthropic souls. And it continues to exist. You should check it out.
Right.
Camp
right.
Harvey.
And they learn
it's
to swim a lot of them.
thing.
Right.
Yeah, it's great.
So one of the things is when you think about Jack came about. I mean, Boston needed a Jack. You know, we think of Boston now as very powerful. You know, we're life sciences, kind of king of the life sciences, and we've got hospitals, and we've got these great universities. But you know, 30, 40 years ago, I mean, we were
a backwater.
We were a backwater.
Yeah.
Exactly, we were a backwater. Our real estate wasn't nearly as expensive as it is today. We were a backwater, but it was really Jack and Tom working in partnership, kind of, you know, business community and Menino to make Boston what it is today.
Oh yeah.
And so that really is Jack's legacy. I remember when I wrote a little kind of tribute to Jack for the Boston Magazine, you know, kind of the end of the year. I said, you know, to me, Jack's greatest legacy is that he gave Boston its swagger back. You know, and so now we can kind of, you know, we can feel, you know, we're not, because I remember coming here 20 years ago, we always felt second fiddle to New York.
Oh my God, I grew up near here, 45
right.
minutes away. I come up here when I was a little kid, and we were in tough shape.
Right,
What did you say? You went to the same church, right?
Yes.
What did he used to say to you when you were doing the...
If he knew you, you go up to get communion. He would give out communion, and he'd give you communion, he'd give you the host, he'd say, Body of Christ, slap you in the shoulder, say, great to see you, Marjorie.
This is Jack?
Jack. Great to see you, Joe. Hey, Shirley, great, bang. Body of Christ, bang, great to see you. I mean, he was a great guy.
Well,
and he would hold court
for
because he was a famous guy. Yeah. And, you know, after the Mass, he would be holding court. People would come up and talk to him.
That's right.
And he would talk to them all.
In any case, and by the way, we didn't have time today. You wrote a great piece about the new Commonwealth Fund that people should check out. Maybe we'll talk about it next time you're here.
Next time.
Shirley, it's great to see you. Shirley
Thanks
Leung
for having
from the Boston Globe.
Thank you, Shirley. We've been speaking with Shirley Leung, business columnist for the Boston Globe, host of the Say More podcast. Thank you very much, Shirley. Coming up after a quick break, our Two More Things segment. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH live from the BPL and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
Trusted, local news.
Worcester County's homeless population is up about 20% over the last year.
GBH News.
The Commission is a body dedicated to fostering stronger ties with Ireland, focusing on trade and mutual economic support.
Here for what matters to you.
15 communities around Massachusetts have received grants from the State Clean Energy Center for on-street EV charging stations.
GBH 89.7, online at gbhnews.org.
Support for our programs comes from you.
And Mass General Brigham. Their leading heart and vascular specialists are committed to providing breakthrough care to patients with cutting-edge research and innovative treatments. Learn more at massgeneralbrigham.org/heart. And Blythewald, with big, beautiful bamboo birds. 6 sculptures in the gardens, 15 to 30 feet tall, by artist duo The Mythmakers. Blythewald.org.
Welcome back to BPR. Marjorie Egan, Jim Browdy, live at the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Just enough time for 2 more things. Marjorie, what's your one more thing?
Well, I just want to mention that Elon Musk has started groveling, however you say it, in his apology to Donald Trump, you know, saying he said terrible things about the big, beautiful bill, so-called. He called it a disgusting abomination. Worst thing, he threatened to decommission his SpaceX Dragon spacecraft. And probably the worst thing he did was mention that Trump might be in those secret files of the late pedophile Jeffrey Epstein. So he said a lot of bad things. And now he's saying, I regret some of my posts about President Donald Trump last week. They went too far. But unfortunately, you know, for Elon Musk, I don't think groveling gets you anywhere with Donald Trump, so he may be groveling for nothing. Steve Bannon, of course, the president's big fan, said that Elon Musk should be deported. But in any case, Elon has thought better of his attacks on
You
the
left
president.
out that he also said he should be impeached and replaced by the vice president.
That's right, he said that too.
Did, yeah.
That's right. So
okay.
Anyway, that's Elon Musk.
So this is not my one more thing, but it's a half a thing. On CNN right now, they are reporting that Trump will attend the opening night of Les Miserables at Kennedy Center, and at least 10 of the performers indicated they will not perform. So it'll be interesting to see how that play is going to go. I want to talk about naming rights in the Trump administration. There's simple rules I think is fair. Tell me if you disagree. If you're a person of color, a woman, forget about it. If you're a white guy, a racist, or an insurrectionist, come on down. Is that a fair? Okay.
I would say, yeah.
Here's the deal with Army bases. He said this yesterday, too. He's restoring the names of Confederate generals despite a law prohibiting it. And the way he's doing that is by picking another member of the military who had the exact same last name as one of the Confederate generals. So theoretically, it doesn't violate the law. Let me tell you about a couple of them. Fort Gordon is named after John Brown Gordon, a suspected Ku Klux Klan member. Put his name back up. Bragg, you remember he did that? Took it down, then put up another Bragg.
Another Bragg.
One of the South's worst and most hated generals. Soldiers tried to kill him, his own soldiers. Robert E. Lee, Fort Robert E. Lee, owned more than 200 slaves, pursued and punished them when they escaped, separated families to pay off debts, and fought in court to prevent them from being freed. So we're putting those names back. And then, on the other hand, the ships. We mentioned this the other day. Harvey Milk, was he the first
openly
LGBT,
gay mayor
public
of the city
official?
No,
he was like a counselor there, whatever. But was he a mayor or was he whatever? He was an elected official. I think he was the first openly gay elected official in the United States. We had Thurgood Marshall, the first black justice on the Supreme Court. His name's coming down. Harriet Tubman, who freed at great risk and brought, dozens and dozens of blacks north. And Ruth Bader Ginsburg. All names are disappearing from these ships. And again, I know this doesn't
Milk was on the Board of Supervisors.
Board of
right.
Supervisors, right. And he was killed, and he was recognized by putting his name on a ship. That name is coming off. So I think it's fair to say, once again, if you're a person of color or a woman, there's no place for your name anywhere. And if you're a white guy who believes in overthrowing the government of the United States, as these Confederate judges did, and a racist, then it is perfectly fine. That's all I got to say.
Okay.
Thank you.
Musk also said, kill the bill. And he said it was wrong to bankrupt the United States of America. But he's changed his mind now, and everything's fine. Okay. You're listening to Boston Public Radio.
You are.
89.7 GBH. We're broadcasting live from the Boston Public
Marjorie
Library
has
and
no idea
streaming
who's
at
next, I can
youtube.com.
tell.
Yes, I do.
Oh, you do?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, no, you don't.
Yes, I do.
Who
Coming
is
up
it?
after the 1 o'clock news, animal whisperer Sy
you're
Montgomery
right.
is next
Excellent.
with fascinating new research about smiling salamanders. Uncanny ability to regenerate limbs, and they're the cutest salamanders you've ever
Cutest
seen.
I've ever seen in my life.
What it means for human beings. You're listening to BPR and 89.7 GBH.
GBH is committed to lifelong learning, and the Beacon Circle shares that commitment with gifts of $2,400 or more. It's one big way to help keep our community informed and connected. Learn more at gbh.org/Beacon Circle.
Support for GBH comes from you
and the University of Massachusetts Amherst, the Commonwealth's flagship public university. You can learn more about research, innovation, and economic impact for the Commonwealth at umass.edu. And the Peabody Essex Museum, presenting Making History, 200 Years of American Art. Hopper, Cassatt, O'Keeffe, and more come to PEM on June 14th. You can learn more at pem.org.
You're listening to 89.7 WGBH HD1 Boston. Online at gbhnews.org. GBH News. What matters to you?
I'm Jim Browdy, ahead on Hour 3 of VPR live from the Boston Public Library. Animal Authority naturalist Sy Montgomery is back to talk about those cute Pokemon-looking salamanders called axolotls, as researchers at Northeastern look into whether humans could ever tap into their secrets around limb regeneration.
I'm Marjorie Egan. Then move over, coffee badgers. Step aside, quiet quitters. There's a trendy new way to work without working, and it's called ghost working. Essentially, feigning busyness to fool the boss.
We do that 3 hours every day.
Are you
Thank
guilty? Are you guilty of switching tabs when your boss stops by? Are we all just burned out, fed up with corporate jargon? Or are we all just plain lazy? And whose job is it to come up with all these terms for slacking off? How long before we start calling it what it really is? Jimming around. Your calls and texts next in the third hour of BPR 89.7 GBH live from the Boston Public Library.
Live from NPR News, I'm Lakshmi Singh. Protests over President Trump's immigration policies are cropping up across the United States. NPR's Sergio Martinez Beltran reports thousands of people staged demonstrations in major cities such as Chicago, Seattle, and New York.
Outside of New York! Outside of New York!
Thousands of people marched near New York City's Immigration and Customs Enforcement field office and throughout the streets of Manhattan. These as part of a series of nationwide rallies against the Trump administration's immigration detentions and the deployment of the U.S. military in California, where police and protesters have clashed in some parts of town. The Trump administration has vowed to arrest 3,000 migrants a day. To accomplish that goal, the Department of Homeland Security has conducted raids all across the country, from a parking lot in a Los Angeles Home Depot to a Dominican neighborhood in Puerto Rico to a meatpacking plant in Nebraska. In New York City, the protest was peaceful. Sergio Martinez Beltran, NPR News, New York.
NPR's Scott Horsley says the broad national numbers don't indicate a major economic impact yet from the enforcement action, but there are a lot of anecdotal reports of economic fallout.
High-profile raids on farms and construction sites and restaurants has certainly captured attention and driven some workers into hiding. According to the Labor Department's tally, more than 1 million foreign-born workers dropped out of the labor force over the last 2 months. Now, we don't know how many of those were in the country illegally, but it's likely some people have quit going to work because they're fearful of being arrested and possibly deported.
NPR's Scott Horsley reporting. President Trump's One Big Beautiful Bill calls for $45 billion to support mass deportations. The spending and tax cut legislation is pending in the Senate weeks after it passed the House. Another area of impact is Obamacare. Changes to enrollment and, crucially, premium subsidies could affect more than 24 million people. The nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office projects millions may lose or drop coverage by 2034. Home insurance bills are soaring, and some people are losing that coverage as the cost of weather disasters keep climbing. One solution is for homeowners to better protect their properties from various threats such as extreme storms and fires that are being fueled by climate change. Here's NPR's Michael Copley.
Homeowners in some states can get grants and insurance discounts for installing fortified roofs or fireproofing their houses. But the discounts are usually small, and the upgrades might not help you get coverage in the first place, says Dave Jones, who runs the Climate Risk Initiative at UC Berkeley Law.
If they won't write you the insurance because they're not taking into account forest treatment and they're not taking into account home hardening, the discount doesn't help you.
An industry group says insurers have had to limit coverage in some markets as costs rose, and that they'll take a hard look at what homeowners have done to protect themselves when they can grow their businesses again. Michael Copley, NPR News.
From Washington, this is NPR.
Good afternoon. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. Just getting word that Beach Boys founder and tremendous solo artist Brian Wilson has died at 82. Beach Boy Brian Wilson dead at 82. They used to pull me on stage with them when they played in Boston. Some local environmental groups are calling on energy regulators to reject a 5-year climate change adaptation proposal from the state's major utilities, saying the plans don't go far enough to help the state transition to clean energy. Salem News reports that the State Department of Public Utilities is reviewing plans filed by National Grid, Eversource, and other natural gas providers that detail the steps they plan to take over the next 5 years to help the state meet its benchmarks to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And a day after Boston Mayor Michelle Wu defended last month's firing of 2 City Hall staff members in connection with a domestic disturbance, 2 city councilors are now trying to make a formal request for an independent investigation. We have more from GBH's Soraya Wintersmith.
Murphy and Southie Councilor Ed Flynn are planning an emergency resolution on the inquiry.
No, I'm off the
resolution itself wouldn't prompt an investigation, but it would officially call into question the process that led to the staffers' dismissals. One staffer claims her termination was meant to protect top City Hall aide Segun Idowu, who's accused of inappropriately propositioning her in the hours before her arrest. In a memo to the council, Boston's top HR official says the council is legally barred from weighing in on individual city personnel matters. Soraya Wintersmith, GBH News.
77 degrees in Boston. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include the Council for Interior Design Qualification, whose certified designers work to protect occupants through the design of code-compliant and accessible environments. Learn more at cidq.org/NPR.
Welcome to hour number 3 of Boston Public Radio. Jim Braude and Marjorie Egan. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library. Thank you. And streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. The mayor of the city of Boston, Michelle Wu, will be with us on Tuesday from 1 to 2. And the governor of the Commonwealth, Maura Healey, will be with us June 25th from 11 to 12. Hello again, Jim.
I want to make one addition. When I was talking about names that were pulled off ships by Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense, I mentioned Harvey Milk, first openly gay elected official in California. It was not nationwide, my apologies. But a member of the audience came by and said I failed to mention, which I shouldn't have failed to do, that he also served in the Navy for a bunch of years. Yet more reason why he deserved to have his name on a ship. It is no more, as I said. In any case, we're joined on Zoom for our Afternoon Zoo by naturalist and author Sy Montgomery. Her latest terrific book is What the Chicken Knows. Sy, wonderful to talk to you as always.
Oh, it's so good to be back.
Well, Sy Montgomery, thank you very much for joining us. But before we really get into the meat of what we're talking to you about today, we're going to talk to you first about this little salamander that can regenerate itself. But we want to play a little bit, and you can probably straighten out the confusion that Jim was experiencing early this morning. Our crack staff obtained sound of Jim trying to figure out how to pronounce the name of this little salamander.
Jamie, how do you say axolotls? Axolotls? Axolotls. This is true. No, it's A-X-O-L-O-T-O-I-S.
Axolotls.
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 Lottles?
Axolotl?
This is humiliating.
Okay.
I didn't know it was an L. I thought it was an I. I couldn't read it. I know it's an L.
Okay.
Thank you. That was really humiliating. I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
A great animal.
Yeah.
It was?
Oh, my God.
Yeah, tell us about this salamander and how you say it.
Axolotl.
Axolotl.
And it's just worth it to discuss, to have axolotl just trip off your tongue in conversation.
Absolutely.
I'm so glad that we get to use this new word.
Yes. Well, when we used to still do medical research, we've decided not to do that anymore under Donald Trump, but there was an exciting link up to medical research and this axolotl, so tell us.
Yeah, axolotls have the ability to regenerate their limbs perfectly, and so do a number of other animals, including octopuses. People would love to be able to regenerate our own limbs, so they want to know how do they do it. And what they've discovered is that there's a particular molecule that tells your genes which part you're regenerating. Every cell in our body has all the genetic instructions for how to build every other part of your body.
Oh,
but
I didn't know
you don't
that.
want, your ear coming out of your severed arm, and you don't want your foot coming out of your nose. So, how do the genes know what to properly turn on when they're regenerating, when an axolotl is regenerating its a severed limb? So now they've been able to trace this. They inserted a gene into the axolotl that actually makes it glow in a way that you can follow the pathway that the instructions take that tell the axolotl regenerate, the arm and regenerate the hand and then regenerate this. That has always been kind of amazing to me. We're so far from being able to do this with people, though.
Can we show the photograph of, this is maybe the cutest, is it an animal? Whatever it is, salamander.
Yeah, it's
Is that
totally
the cutest thing in the history? How big is that little, whatever the hell it's called there, Sy?
Axolotl.
Axolotl, thank you. How big is it?
Look at that.
They're about this big, 1, 2, 3, maybe 5 or 6 inches.
Oh, they are.
And what's interesting about these guys is they are literally forever young. They always have their gills. They don't, a lot of salamanders, they're born as gilled creatures, and then they go on land and they absorb their gills and they grow up. But these guys always keep their gills and they always live in the water. And you can get these guys as pets at almost any pet store. But in the wild, where they come from, their population is now so tiny, it's confined to a single tiny little, I think you pronounce it cenote, but it's a little tiny waterway in Mexico. And they're severely endangered, although there are zillions of them living in, kids' aquariums in pet stores and all over the place doing research. And I know Harvard had had quite a bit of research going on for a long time with these animals because of what they're able to do.
I went to a pet store and asked, I said, I want to buy an axolotls, and they had no idea what I was talking about, so I had to go elsewhere. I have a couple of questions. If there are other animals like octopuses that do regeneration of limbs or whatever you want to call it, why is it this particular animal that allegedly gives greater hope to scientists that they'll be able to figure out how humans might be able to regenerate limbs? That's question one. Question two is, how does the axolotl know how to generate the right thing that it lost? You know what I mean? So
yeah,
go
they
above
just
those.
That's the thing that they have figured out, as opposed to why am I not growing a tail?
Right, you said. But
Right. And this is the thing that they figured out, how the genes know to turn on those instructions to make that thing.
Okay.
Yeah. And why I think they're more interested in axolotls is octopuses last shared a common ancestor with humans 500 million years ago. They are invertebrate animals. They are on the other side of the great vertebral divide that divides everybody with a backbone with everybody who doesn't have a backbone. So axolotls and salamanders, as well as all reptiles and amphibians, do have skeletons, so they're more closely related to us. So they're more likely to be able to reveal things that are pertaining to us.
Just as an aside, I was saying how cute it was. Derek Jackson, do you know Derek Jackson? Do you have a relationship with him? Derek Jackson used to be a wonderful columnist at the Globe. He went to the Union for Concerned Scientists, and he's very involved in the effort to, what's it called? East something. I know, to keep, to restore the puffin population to someplace north of us, kind of thing. And one of the days we had him on a couple of years ago, we were talking about why there was so much interest, even though it was great that there was, in restoring the puffins to whatever that island was called, and they were fairly successful. And he admitted that in part it was because the puffin was such a cute animal. And obviously this thing is too. In your life, and I'm sure you don't discriminate based upon the appearance of an animal, that's sort of sad in a way. Do you find that there is more interest in helping, preserving, resuscitating, whatever the verbs are? It's incredible.
How could you not?
An animal that is cute by human standards as opposed to one that may not be. Sy Montgomery, do you understand that question?
You're absolutely right. And this is why they used the words charismatic megafauna. That's why the World Wildlife Fund chose the panda and not the giant blues earthworm as their, as their emblem. Because everyone loves this and wants to rally around, the tiger, and this is one reason why I write about chickens and octopuses and tarantulas who may not get all the love. I also write about some pretty cute and charismatic animals like snow leopards and tigers and the great apes, who, many of whom look like guys I dated back in high school. Well, big muscles too.
Okay.
But yeah, people try to get others to save what they love and what they're attracted to.
Well, don't you think
that makes sense?
In the dog world, I mean, I think there's so much animus toward pit bulls, and pit bulls have done some bad things. We know they got big, but I think that it really
eating babies, I think, is more important than how they look.
Rottweilers can be pretty tough dogs. German Shepherds can be pretty tough dogs. Doberman Pinschers can be really tough dogs. But I think the pit bull, because it's not, I don't think, at least in my opinion, an attractive dog, it takes more grief.
I agree with you. I think there's a big prejudice against pit bulls. And as we know, this is the case with humans all the time.
I know.
People who don't look like you. Many people, I'm one of those people that's attracted to someone who's unlike me because they have more to teach me. But I think many of us naturally are attracted to those who most remind us of ourselves, which is one reason why a lot of people love the dogs that have the little pushed-in faces.
Oh, yeah.
They look like, our own cute little babies. But I love pit bulls. They can be the most devoted, lovely animals. And as far as eating babies, I mean, people eat babies too. They not
do?
a lot, but it does happen. It does happen.
Okay, let's not have the pit bull discussion. We'll save that for another day. Can we
Thank
talk
goodness it's not widespread.
Can we talk about another really cute animal? Penguins.
Oh, let's.
And
penguins.
what is happening in Antarctica? This is rather odd. How penguins unintentionally are combating climate change. Could you explain how they're doing that, Sy Montgomery, please?
Yeah, I absolutely love this because we get to talk about poop. And,
we do.
Bird
of our
poop
favorite
is not
topics,
universally revered. We get mad at pigeons for pooping on statues, and we get mad at seagulls for splattering your car. But penguin poop may be saving the Antarctic from melting faster than it already is. And there was this study recently done on a colony of 60,000 Adelie penguins. These are middle-sized, really attractive penguins. I mean, who's not an attractive penguin? But these are mid-sized penguins with a white eye ring and a really black iris. And there was a study of 60,000 of them, and you can imagine that makes a lot of poop. Well, it forms a cloud of ammonia, which is why poop doesn't smell good. And the ammonia gas actually leads to cloud formation of puffy white clouds in the sky. And those clouds, being white, reflect heat back up into space.
Wow.
And if you didn't have that ammonia, the clouds wouldn't have enough particles to form. So penguins are protecting us all with their poop. But of course, if something happens to the penguins, which it could because of our global warming, we're in deep penguin doo-doo. Or maybe we're not. Thurber, as you can see.
Where is he?
He's barking. He's barking. I can hear him.
Always wants to say hello to you, Jim Martin.
Well, he's a hell of a singer, as we know.
I think he knows your voice. Yes.
I love that.
Sy, speaking of the ocean and the Antarctic, tell us about World Ocean Day. You were there for part of the celebration at the New England Aquarium.
Yeah, World Ocean Day is a fabulous thing. World Ocean Day actually was first proposed at the Rio conference in the 80s by Canada. Why don't we have a day in which we all celebrate and think about the ocean, which after all is most of the planet, because the ocean covers, 70% of the surface of the planet, but contains 90% of its habitable space. And most of us don't think about the ocean and don't really know the ocean because we just skim along the surface in our boats or swim at the edge. But this is where life is. So the aquarium has been putting on a special day. I think we might have had 8,000 visitors. They were hoping for 8,000 visitors with all kinds of fabulous, fun things that people could do. And to make us think about the ways that, we can support the ocean. Sometimes by failing to do something stupid and bad to the ocean, sometimes by engaging with some of the programs that the aquarium has. We actually make choices every day that affect the health of the ocean. And it's wonderful to know that there's stuff that each individual person can do. So it was a really fun day. And I got to go behind the scenes and say goodbye to Murphy, who is now senescing. He's the elderly giant Pacific octopus, and I met the new baby, who hasn't been named yet. It's also a male. And I hung out with these two awesome wolf eels. I should send you the picture of the wolf eels.
We'd love to see that.
Beautiful Muppet faces. They're adorable.
How long do the octopus live?
They only live 3 to 5 years.
Oh, not
and by
long.
the time you meet them at the aquarium, they're already maybe several years old.
Okay.
Because they hatch out of these little eggs the size of a grain of rice. And they're planktonic at first as juveniles. They're called paralarvae, but they look exactly like tiny baby miniature octopuses, but they're really little. And they're part of the plankton, and everybody can eat them. But by the time they get big enough that you can actually see them and take them back to the aquarium, they've been alive for a long time. So they're going to break your heart. You know, you fall in love with an octopus, and just like 2 or 3 years later, they die because they live fast and die young.
And of course,
By the way,
Solo
her
the
book,
Octopus.
one of the
yep.
best books ever.
Where you were very enamored of that octopus
And
at the
vice
aquarium.
versa.
It's a great book. One of your many great books, Sy.
Oh gosh, thank you, Marty.
Hey, Sy, before we leave National Ocean Day, I probably should know the answer to this, but is plastic and heating the two greatest threats to the ocean, or what is the greatest threat?
Oh, you know, it's so hard to come up with the greatest threat. I guess it would be global warming. And, you know, plastic is miserable. And of course, plastic comes from the same place fossil fuels come. Yeah. They are made out of the same juice. I mean, it's the oil companies that give us the stuff to make plastic. By 2050, there's going to be more plastic in the ocean than fish.
I know.
And it's horrendous. And if you go to the store, you can try really hard to not buy stuff in plastic, but you cannot come home from the grocery store with no plastic at all. I mean, at least not around here. We try to avoid it, but it's just in everything. But one thing you always can avoid is those single-use plastic bags, of which, you know, you hold on to them for 15 minutes and they persist for like 15 centuries. It's ridiculous. It totally should be outlawed.
Well, I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon.
Well,
tragically.
in some towns they have plastic
They
bans.
do. They do have. They have one in
Some
Boston.
in Massachusetts.
Yeah, I think we have one in Boston.
I don't know, maybe
you see the
Cambridge,
plastic
I don't
bags just get stuck in the trees, and now they have paper bags. If you go like to, but I think you can buy a bag, a CVS bag, but I don't know what
Why
it's
don't we
made
figure
out
this
of.
out at 2 o'clock?
We'll
okay?
figure it out at 2 o'clock.
Hey, Sy, one of the things I love talking to you about is
Shut right down there.
No, I mean, no, we don't know the answer, so why embarrass ourselves worse than we already have?
Okay.
Okay, so I didn't know the answer either.
Okay.
I love talking to you about animals that do something to have fun. And when I read the story about these cockatoos that have chosen, and that's the critical word, I think, you'll correct me if I'm wrong, to drink from what in New England, I never heard the term before I moved here, from a bubbler. From a water fountain. The conclusion, well, describe how they do it, but the conclusion is, since there are tons of other water sources much more easily available, they do it because they want to do it because it's a fun exercise. So tell people how they do it and why they do it. Sy Montgomery, please.
Yeah, I absolutely love this. It is difficult to turn these things on. You have to twist the handle. Mm-hmm. You have to grip the spout, whereas cockatoos could land almost anywhere and just dip their beaks in the water. But researchers noticed that they were doing this all over town. And this was a study that was done right in Sydney. And they knew, too, that they enjoy flipping open garbage bins. But in that case, they're finding special treats that they wouldn't find elsewhere. This thing was published in the journal Biology Letters. And this Max Planck Institute researcher had seen the animals do this. And at first they thought someone just forgot to turn off the water. But they saw that they were figuring this out. They tagged 24 birds from about 150 living in this reserve in Western Sydney. They put cameras in front of the fountains, and they saw the birds trying to use the fountains 500 times. But this is in 44 days, but only about 70% of the birds who tried it got it at first, but then they taught it to the other birds.
Isn't that great?
And they discovered that they're not just doing it in Sydney, they're doing it in Brisbane, where they simultaneously discovered this fun way to get water. These birds aren't migratory, so we know that the Brisbane birds didn't learn it from the Sydney birds. So this is like the invention of the blast furnace, simultaneously in China and Europe and Africa. Cockatoos just spontaneously figured this out for fun.
Let me read this line from the New York Times. I mean, it's Sy touched on this. The Mohawk parrots, the cockatoos, deftly use one foot to twist the handle open with their other claw gripping the spout. And I mean, it's chillingly great, isn't it? I mean, it's amazing.
I love it. These birds are so smart. Many parrots speak to us meaningfully in English. And of course, cockatoos are parrots, as are African greys. And right here in Boston, Irene Pepperberg worked with a parrot named Alex, who she taught to identify, it's what color is it? Green. What shape is it? Square. But he often just spontaneously told her stuff that was in his heart. And every night, he would say goodnight to her and say that he loved her.
Oh my gosh.
But I think the most moving thing and most revelatory thing he ever said was one time she took him home from the laboratory, and out her window, he saw an owl. I may have mentioned this to you guys before.
I don't think so.
He'd never seen an owl before. But birds instinctively know owls will prey on you if you're a parrot. So he saw this horrifying owl, and so he screamed in English to his human friend, "Want to go back, want to go back." He wanted to go back to the lab and away from the scary owl. And he was telling us this thing that came from deep in his genetic memory as a bird, that he was telling a Harvard researcher in English what he felt.
Wow.
Exactly.
These things about animals, after talking to you, I can't kill an ant anymore because I'm thinking about the ants' a social life,
They do have a social life.
And the ants
have more social life than we do.
They do. And so you think this could be somebody's brother or a mother or whatever.
It is.
So it's terrible. My little granddaughter was afraid of the ants. She said, "Oh no, we can't kill the ant because it might be somebody's mother."
Do you remember when I heard a friend of mine told me, because I'm a big lobster fan, you're not, that lobsters mate for life?
I know.
Which luckily is not true, I hope, Sy.
Why is that luckily not true? You'd like them to mate for life.
No, if they mate for life and you eat one, you're taking away the partner.
That's right. But yeah, let's hope.
Sy, can I get back to this cockatoo thing for a minute? The researchers concluded that for the reasons you described, that fun was the motivation here. I don't even know how to ask this. What does fun satisfy in an animal? What's the motivation to have fun in a cockatoo or any other animal that you've concluded or your colleagues have concluded does X because it's a fun activity for them?
Now, that's a good question because scientists do want to know if an animal is doing something, because if I do this, I will survive, or I will, have greater reproductive opportunities, or, those who are genetically related to me will pass on my genes in that way. So it's a reasonable question. So if they cannot find any way that this has particular survival value, if it is just done for the pure joy of it, that is play. And the same thing with us. I mean, I think of all the people who are doing crossword puzzles right this minute, people playing with their Rubik's Cube, people who are learning to paint when they don't have any intention making money as an artist. They're doing exactly the same thing that animals do. And animals may be doing this all the time in ways that we don't recognize. I mean, it's easy to recognize when they're at your public water fountain turning it on. But they may be doing other things that we simply don't recognize that they're doing for fun.
Sy, one last quick thing, because I have a historical connection to this. When I worked at NECN, New England Cable News, years ago, a colleague of mine from Vermont, Anya Haneke, a reporter, did a brilliant story on these bats that were dying by the millions. We shouldn't end on a sad story. We should have reversed it because of this white-nosed fungus or whatever the hell it was. And it was literally killing millions of bats. And apparently another strain of this is back in some form. What's the state of affairs? And by the way, why do bats matter in the ecosystem to us?
Oh, God. Bats are super, super important. They're important for pest control. I mean, they eat a gazillion of the insects that destroy our crops. They eat mosquitoes. They eat moths. Many of them are crucial pollinators. Most of them eat insects, but there's a number of bats that eat fruits and pollen and eat nectar. And there's a whole bunch of things out there, saguaro, cacti, and some of our figs, for example.
So how much at risk are they this time?
Well, it's the fungus that decimated them, which was discovered in 2006, it turns out it has an evil twin that hasn't come here yet.
I see.
Oh.
So there's two kinds of white nose, and the other one is also from Europe, Asia, but a different part of Europe, Asia. And they discovered this by genomically sequencing this thing, and it's still over there and hasn't come over here. The reason why it decimated our bats and didn't decimate Europe and Asia's bats is the same reason that smallpox decimated Native Americans. I mean, they just didn't have, the antibodies to fight it. So if that thing comes over here, and we still don't know who brought it here, we assume it was a caver who may have had a single spore on his or her shoe or climbed, and then came to explore caves in New York, which is where it first showed up. And these poor bats, they're peacefully hibernating in their caves, and there's this like fungus there, and they get it on them. It gives them a little white nose, but that's not what kills them. What kills them is their bodies are like, I've been infected. I've got to use all of my fat stores to fight this thing off. And so instead of hibernating, they get up and they use up all their fat stores, and they basically starve to death.
God.
Yeah.
I shouldn't end it
Why
on
did
that
you
one.
do that?
I don't know why I did it. I feel bad about it.
Well,
all right.
People are working on, they're working on vaccines. They're working on an antifungal spray that you can put into caves. You can change the temperature in the cave. And the survivors of the current strain may be resistant and passing that resistance on. So it's not completely hopeless, but we got to keep that other.
I hope they weren't doing that research at
coming.
I hope they weren't doing that research at Harvard, because we
that will be
we
no
have shut
more,
down research on Harvard for human beings. So anyway,
Yeah,
Sy Montgomery, thank you so much.
Sy, we love talking to you, as you well know. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you, Sy. We've been speaking with Sy Montgomery, author and naturalist. Her latest book is What the Chicken Knows, what was we said before, Solo and Octopus, Hummingbird's Gift, The Good, Good Pig. Look up Sy Montgomery. She got a great bunch of books about the animal world, and they will make you
happy.
Yes, they will. Coming up next. Move over coffee badging, Jim. Ghost working is the new term du jour for employees doing the bare minimum not to get fired. The lines are open. We're asking, how are you hacking productivity at your workplace? How are you staying ahead of burnout and corporate cutbacks, and are you pretending to work when you're really shopping on Amazon? You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
As disasters get more intense, home insurance is getting more expensive, and many homeowners are retrofitting their houses, like strengthening their roofs, to reduce their risk and insurance premiums.
That's a big incentive. I mean, homeowners insurance now has been through the roof because of the storms we've had through here.
How some states are trying to help homeowners on All Things Considered from NPR News.
Today at 4, here on GBH News 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And Rockland Trust Bank, committed to helping individuals and local businesses work towards their financial goals by providing financial advice and resources. More at rocklandtrust.com. Rockland Trust Bank, where each relationship matters. Member FDIC. And Supermicro and NVIDIA, accelerating AI with a wide range of AI servers and the NVIDIA AI Enterprise software platform. Supermicro is committed to driving AI infrastructure breakthroughs with rack-scale innovations.
Welcome back to BPR. Jim Browdy, Marjorie Egan, live at the library, streaming youtube.com/GBH News. If you're a burned out employee, this segment is for you. First, there was coffee badging. We'll describe that in a minute if you don't know what it is. I'm going to describe right now. Come into the office just to use the coffee machine and show your boss you're there fulfilling those draconian back to the office mandates and then going straight back home or to some other remote work location. Now it appears there's something called ghost working. The New York Post, reliable source that it is, of course, refers to it as the practice of, quote, feigning business in order to fool your boss. Things like putting meetings on your work calendar that don't exist, things like that. According to the survey from something called Resume Now, listen to this. To keep up appearances, 23% of workers become ghost workers. They walk around the office with a notebook so that people think they're actually thinking about something, while 22% randomly type gibberish on their keyboards when a supervisor walks
it.
by. So we want to know if you're guilty of ghost working or some variation. What are the little things you're trying to get away with in the office? Showing up late, coffee badging, as I said, just to get through the day with an ounce of your sanity intact. And why are you doing it? Is it burnout? Is it boredom? You hate your boss? Whatever it is. 877-301-8970. Can we start with the best story that Jamie told us today? And we got her permission. Former federal judge Nancy Gertner, this is incredible, used to put on her public calendar so that the press would see it once a month that she was working on U.S. v. Gray. The case was U.S. v. Gray. You know what the gray was?
Her hair.
The gray in her hair. Once a month, she had her hair dyed.
I loved it.
And she put on her calendar U.S. v. Gray. This is a former federal judge, and they never apparently picked up on it, even though that same case came up every single month.
You know, you hear about a lot of people making up excuses if they have to go to the kids' soccer game or something. They say they're having a root canal, and some people have had 20 root canals, like within 3 years at the office. But this one is really, beyond that. They're talking about how 92% of people are looking for other jobs while they're at the job they're at now. And they talk about, as you mentioned, walking around with a notebook, pretending to be on the phone. They keep a spreadsheet open while looking at unrelated content. I love this one. The really go-getters at this gym, they're searching for their next gig using company time to edit their resumes, while an even bolder set, 23%, apply to new positions on work-issued computers, take recruiter calls from the office, and the most brazen, 19%, actually sneak out of their cubicles to interview with other companies.
It's really sad. Have you ever pretended you were working when a boss came by when you weren't?
No, but I worked at places where it was almost impossible to do. I've never really had my own office. I've always
you've never done
open.
that? Okay.
No, I've not. But I did say a few times I said I had to go to the dentist when I was really going to a sporting event for one of my children.
Well, that's pretty bad.
I did lie. I have a lot of root canals, Jim. What have you done?
I do the show. 877-301-8970. Are you engaged in any form of ghost working? And I'm really curious to know, again, if you are, and I assume a lot of you are based on these numbers from this survey, that I'm really curious to know what is the motivator. Is it you don't really like your job, you are experiencing burnout, you don't physically want to be there in the era of hybrid work relationships and that sort of thing?
Well, we had Adam Chandler on earlier in the week. He wrote that book about 99% perspiration, which is basically saying that the American dream is not true. That working really hard isn't going to help you get there, because there's so many obstacles in your way now, and the people, even when they're working really hard and busting their hump, they can't afford things like enough to eat or a place to live, or forget about a new house, or forget about a new car. That the financial stress is huge. I think that's part of it, a resentment about how much people in entry-level jobs get paid.
You know what I'm thinking about? Do you know that the feds, there's a bipartisan bill to increase the federal minimum wage? You know what the federal minimum wage is right now?
$7.
$7.
What's seven times 40?
280.
Okay. How far do you get in Massachusetts on $280 a week?
Not far.
Not very far.
Well, we have a state, but we have a state minimum wage, so it supersedes
$15 here.
But there's some states that directly connect to the federal minimum wage.
Just to point out that how little money that is, and I was saying, I don't want to get off topic, but there was a very depressing story in the Globe now that people say, why are people homeless? They think, well, because they get alcohol problems or mental health problems or drug problems. The biggest reason now is
unaffordability of housing.
They can't afford a place to live. I mean,
877-301-8970. Got off topic. We're talking about ghost working and whether you are a practitioner. And since we don't know who you are, feel free, if you've got something really creative you do to ghost work that you want to share with your fellow listeners, we'd love that too. Patrick, you're in Sutton. You're on Boston Public Radio. Hey there.
Hi, first time, long time.
Thank you.
Just have to support the idea, right? Mid-level manager, I said, my group now has turned into the complaints department. So I put ghost meetings on all day because I can't solve everyone else's problems.
So what does that mean?
Middle management, that is the worst place to be, I think. You got it coming from above and you got it coming from below. I feel bad for you, Patrick. It isn't easy, is it?
No, it's not. I want to contribute and I want to be, a good person, but there's just no added value when all you get are complaints.
Wow. Boy, Patrick, thanks. That's a hell of a start. We appreciate your first call. Call again soon, 877-301-897. I would love to carry a notebook. I mean, carrying the notebook thing around and a pen is a pretty cool way to deal with this, don't you think?
Yeah.
Look at Jamie. There's nothing written in there
either. He's got his
either.
notebook right there.
Really?
Okay, we have some text. I'm ghost working right now and do it every day from 11 to 2. You two clowns, that means you and me, Jim,
I think it does.
are at fault. Sean in the car says, I usually listen to Jim. That's how I pretend to be busy. How about that one?
That's funny.
And this person says, I've banked 1,306 sick hours, and I will ghost the hell out of my job before I retire. That's from John in Beverly. 877-301-8970 is the phone number. Pretending to work today while I'm really at the library watching you two. Have to stay anonymous.
Where are you? Who wrote that text?
They're trying to stay anonymous, Jim, in case there are any listeners at her workplace or his workplace.
Raise your hand. We're not going to out you. And what's the name of your employer? Oh, my God. She did raise her hand.
There you go. There you
Your
go.
secret is not safe with us. I want to be clear.
This is
wow.
Here's another good one.
Love that, by the way.
I say I have
That's
to
pretty
run
great.
home to let the dogs out, but I have no dogs.
Well, this is a variation on a theme. We've mentioned this a million times. The greatest practitioner of ghost working was Manny Ramirez, the fabulous hitter for the Boston Red Sox. How many times did his grandmother die and he couldn't play?
Yeah, at least 5 or 6 times.
Same grandmother, by the way.
Same grandmother. She was dead and dead and dead and dead.
Matt in Holliston, we were talking about ghost working. Welcome to the show. Hi.
Oh, hi. I'm glad you let me on. I'm a long-time listener.
Thank you.
Caller.
Thank you.
And I am retired now, but my last real job was working for a data printing company, and they sort of forced me into an application support job, which I really didn't like. I used to do the programming and everything, but I'd probably, you'd wait for a problem to come up, and you had nothing to do most of the day. So I spent a lot of time meticulously going over my retirement plans, Googling stuff, doing the budget, trying to figure out how I was going to live after work.
But there are only so many times you can do that, aren't there, Matt?
Well, there's a lot involved with it.
Okay.
Now I'm sort of a certified financial planner for myself.
That's beautiful. Hey, Matt, thank you for sharing that. Matt in Cumberland, Rhode Island, texts and says, I pull the old George Costanza. I pretend to look agitated and frustrated. That's my default go-to, works every time. Well, our staff actually came up with that famous moment. Here's Seinfeld, show about nothing, that has a sound clip for everything. Here it is.
What do you do all day?
Not that much.
I thought that new promotion was supposed to be a lot more work.
Yeah, when the season starts. Right now I sit around pretending that I'm busy.
How do you pull that off?
I always look annoyed. Yeah, when you look annoyed all the time, people think that you're busy. Think about it.
Yeah, you do. He looks very busy.
Mr. Wilhelm gave me one of those little stress dolls. All right, back to work.
Back to work. Pretty good last line. 877-301-8970.
I usually only ghost work when I'm not quiet quitting.
Yeah,
That's a good one
that's
too.
another fabulous
That was the thing
expression.
we talked about during the pandemic. Yeah, people were quietly
Just
quitting.
stop working
just
without
stop working.
quitting, yeah.
Steve from New Hampshire, what do you think, Steve?
Hello, Steve.
Hi, I just want to let you know that AI replaced my actual job about a year ago, and no one seems to notice.
Meaning you're still, quote, doing it. Is that right?
Everything technology. Oh, yeah.
Yes.
I love it, Steve.
So people call with questions, and I'm typing, or in some cases I can actually put my phone on speaker, and I have AI open, and I'm still the expert.
So wait a second. If you put someone on speaker and you have AI on, the AI hears the question or issue and then produces the result which you deliver to the caller?
Yes, completely confident in my answer.
It's fabulous. I hope that's true, because that's a great story. Steve, thank you very much for the call. I really appreciate it.
Here's one that says, I'm a dental hygienist. I cannot pretend to be working. My hands are in someone's mouth, or they are not. I long for retirement, says Rosemary from Lowell. And here's somebody who's mad at us, Jim, calling us upper middle class, ex-prep school doo-doo-foos. How about actual hard-working folks at menial labor jobs, no paid time off, no medical, maternity leave, no benefits, no health insurance? Please stop enabling the spoiled yuppies.
Okay, get over it. I mean, does he consider police officers yuppies on a detail, for example?
I don't know.
How hard do you think officers? I actually support police details. You don't, so let's say it that way. How hard does the average cop work on a police detail?
Well, I think,
and they're not a feat.
I think on an average detail, they're on their phone.
They're on their phone.
They're on their phone a lot. But I support some police details. I mean, some are, but usually you don't need them in the city when it's, especially when it's like a cul-de-sac.
Who would you say is the person most responsible in Massachusetts for a modest reduction in police details?
I think I did.
And why is that?
Because I harassed Deval Patrick
every
day
month.
after day
It's
after
totally
day.
true.
Well, I was at the Herald. The Herald, of course, was obsessed with police details, and so I was instructed not to let Deval Patrick leave the studio without asking him again about police details.
By the way, I firmly believe that Governor Patrick made a modest change.
He made a modest
to
change.
Shut you up. No, to shut you up.
Yeah, there a lot of cities, well, I shouldn't say a lot because I'm not even sure how many, but some cities and towns have gotten rid of them within the city boundaries. We are the only state in the union, by the way,
that has police details.
That has police details. Everybody else has traffic people with the orange vests on. They stand out there and direct the traffic, but we don't do that here. Okay.
Anonymous texter says, I used to work with a guy who would leave for lunch, lock his door with the radio on in his office, then go to the strip club for the afternoon. An anonymous texter says, a mouse jiggler is your friend. It keeps your computer active so you don't get signed out, and if anybody's checking, it looks like you are working. So apparently we have some very skillful ghost workers here on BPR. Tom in Worcester, hey.
The mouse jiggler beat me to it. That's exactly what I was going to be saying, was to keep my laptop from falling off. I have a homemade mouse jiggler, my washing machine.
What do you mean?
Mouse on the washing machine. Put the mouse on top of the washing machine in a little bowl. And then run the washer and it keeps the mouse moving.
Is that really true?
It works.
That's great.
Maybe I need a new washer.
Hey, Tom, thank you for your call. We appreciate it. 877-301-8970 is our number.
I have never not ghost worked. I always ended up doing everybody else's work because they were slackers. Oh, this person says I never ghost work. I worked at a firm downtown and my direct supervisor used to nap at his desk while I did his work, and I was mandated to put the fake hours in the timesheet for my boss. I went back to school just before COVID, and my fellow students were ghost working during classes, not paying attention, purchasing junk off Amazon.
When you were working in print news, it's pretty hard when you're doing live radio to be ghost working. You're probably too guilt-ridden. You probably worked all the time, right?
Well, when you're right in the middle of the room and your boss is 7 feet away and there are people across from you and you have to write a story in like a half an hour.
But if they weren't watching you, you're not the kind of, you'd feel it was like stealing, right? Yes.
I would feel that I would get in a lot of trouble if I didn't hand in my story by the time I was supposed to hand in my story. It was sometimes 2 stories. You didn't have time. And that's a good thing in a way. If you have a lot of
deadlines.
No, well, deadlines are good things. But if you have a lot of work to do, then you don't have time to be complaining. And people that don't have enough work to do.
Can I tell you something? I have a lot of work to do, and I'm able to fit in complaining every single day.
Well, you manage to balance both things, Jim, and with an incredible performance every morning.
You know what I love? At our morning meeting, I love when everybody, including you, look at each other when I'm speaking with that. I can't even describe what the look is. Oh, here he goes again.
We had this new intern here today. You were on for like a half an hour with every,
I wanted to make sure she felt welcome.
This poor person is thinking,
what did I get myself into?
What did I get myself into?
It got to be me, as the song says.
Jim in the car.
Hello, Jim in the car.
Hello there.
Hello there to you.
I used to work in the crew. Now this is the mid '80s.
Yeah.
For MCI Long Distance Company. They're no longer.
Yep.
In sales, there was about 50, 60 people on the floor.
Yeah.
And I was consistently probably number 2 or 3 in sales, but they wouldn't promote me. So I would go down, me and an older gentleman would go down to the bar, down with the crew, would drink for at least an hour, maybe 2, every day. And they were never the wiser. And this guy, one time, he was so sloshed, when we went back to work late in the afternoon up to the floor, he took a dive on one of the wires, and he got a 19-year disability claim.
Oh.
God love him. Rest in peace, that fella.
So had he not been drunk, that wouldn't have happened, correct?
Oh, well, you know what? What goes around comes around. That was a crappy place to work. Oh, hey, you know.
Yeah, but who would complain about you if you're the second highest selling person? Go drink all afternoon. Who the hell cares? I'm fine with that. Jim, thank you for your call. We appreciate it.
Okay, we have a few good texts here. As a manager in a manufacturing company, I'm expected to put in 50 or 55 hours a week for a 40-hour-a-week salary. So if I spend an hour once in a while paying bills, I do not feel guilty, says Diane from Auburn. And then Jeff from Kittery, Maine says, if you want to see some police details, come and visit Portsmouth, New Hampshire. The cops are usually sitting on the cruiser looking at Pornhub while the flagger does all the work.
They don't know that.
Listen to this from Eliza in Watertown. Okay, I am literally in the car on my way for a root canal. It happens to be the third root canal appointment for me for the same tooth. And every time I go, the dentist says he needs 2 more hours. I hope no one from my office is listening to your program and has the idea that I'm not actually going for my root canal. I feel like the grandmother that keeps dying, but I swear I'm really getting a root canal, and they're not cheap either.
You know, speaking of that guy who said the cops in Portsmouth, I have no idea, on porn sites all day
he's in
long.
Maine. I don't know how he knows what they're doing
Wasn't
in
it under
Portsmouth.
Tom Menino that they restricted certain access at City Hall because so many of the workers were looking at porn during the day?
A friend of mine used to work at City Hall, and he said, people be in there to get their driver's license, pay parking tickets, whatever they were doing. They'd be waiting at the counter and waiting in the counter. And it was because so many of the workers, this is when they first had,
internet porn, right?
access. Yeah, and they're looking at internet porn in the office. So I think they put a stop to it so that people could finally come out to the counter.
Get their license.
And wait on the good citizens that were coming to pay their parking tickets and whatever else that they were doing. Yeah, that's true. Okay.
Danny on the road.
Hey.
Hi.
I heard a rumor that Jim has been ghost working, whatever, using that AI stuff to has his voice go out over the radio.
Well, if you didn't hear it, was it yesterday we did that? It does, and that Chinese police thing. What's it called? Police Q? Is that the name of the thing? It does sound very much like me, and that's actually a wonderful idea I hadn't thought of. Danny, thanks for your suggestion. We much appreciate it. An anonymous texter said, I had a former boss that would come in at 10 a.m., entering behind the building through the warehouse. She would leave at noon to go sleep with the boss for an hour or two. She would then leave at 2 or 3, keeping our computer on, the light in her office on, and sneak out through the warehouse. Whenever the work didn't get done and she was called out, she just blamed me. So
that's a good one. Oh,
that's pretty good.
One of the things that Globe did, these great ones, the Herald did them too, where they follow people that work for the, they work for the DPW, or they were elected officials or something like that. There was a big brouhaha for a while about whether we should have June 17th as a holiday. What is Bunker Hill Day? No, that's in March. Which is the one in June?
Bunker Hill Day is next week.
Okay, whatever it is. And there was a big, and
the
politicians were all saying, we have to honor these battles, and we have to be there to, go to the parades and go to the memorials and all that. So they follow all these people around. And where are they? They're over at the Watertown Mall. They're down at Jordan Marsh, or the best one, on the golf course, Jim. That was the best one. They follow these hardworking public officials, and they find out that they were leaving at 11 o'clock to play a cool 18 holes of golf, and then they were going to the 19th hole, which, of course, hanging out in the bar room for another 2 or 3 hours.
How about
those are the days.
The great photographs in the Globe of all the leaders of the legislature on the beaches of Portugal
drinking
with photographs?
Yeah, they were drinking. Were they drinking pina coladas
I don't
or
know
something
what the
like
hell
that?
they were drinking.
Oh, then they had the time they were all on the booze cruise. Remember the booze cruise? There was a big controversy about that. And one of the young women that was on the boat with the booze cruise pulled up her shirt. And, of course, the Herald got a great shot of that.
That was Peter, whatever his name was.
I don't remember.
State rep, he became Peter Blute, right? Became head of the mass sport. By the way, Zoe, our colleague, used to work at the Eagle Tribune. We used to post up occasionally on the New Hampshire-Massachusetts border to see if we could catch state lawmakers buying booze, cigarettes, scratch tickets over the state line to avoid the taxes.
That's a good one. I bet you caught quite a few.
It really goes.
Okay, my partner works in IT. He says a lot of workers forget the employer can see what pages they visit, and there is a lot of watching porn.
Shocking.
Well, don't they say, isn't that like how millions of Americans spend many hours? I mean, isn't that the pornography watching huge in the United States?
I believe it is.
I believe it is.
Let's go to an anonymous caller. Anonymous caller, you're going to end things
We're
for us.
going to put the voice changer on for you.
From Boston.
Yep.
What's up, Anonymous? Hi.
Hello.
Hello.
So I'm a long time listener.
Thank you.
Ghosting calls, ghosting work doesn't necessarily mean you're faking work. It can mean that they want you in the office and they have no work to give you.
That's a good point.
Why would they do that?
That's why I'm anonymous.
That's why
I'm living that.
Well, because a lot of employers, I mean, it's sort of a Muskian thing. You got to come to work, even if there's not work to do. Isn't that where you're going with that, Anonymous?
That's where I'm going.
Oh, by the way, before you hang up, your boss just called and would like you to call him as soon as you hang up with us. Thank you very much for your call. We appreciate it.
Listen to this one. Speaking of porn, ha ha ha. When classes, previously mentioned, went to Zoom, sometimes we had to share our screens, and once in a while, students shared their screens, not realizing their daily dose of porn was being shared with their entire class.
That's very nice. Look at you.
Oh, that would be terrible.
Before we end this, do you remember about 20 years ago we interviewed, who was the butcher of Broadway?
Oh, God, Frank Rich.
Frank Rich from
Yep.
the New York Times. He had written a piece for the New York Times Magazine. It was on our show. This is 20 years ago.
Before there was an internet.
Before internet.
Well, there wasn't. Was there an
Was
internet
the
20 years ago?
very early part, or
Okay.
not even before, but it was not like it is now.
No.
The amount of money spent on pornography in this country, according to his reporting, was greater than the combination of all sports,
betting,
all theater,
Yeah.
and all betting combined
That's right.
in the United States. Again, that was before the
Yep.
internet.
And things have not apparently changed.
Apparently.
Okay. Thank you very much
that's
for
it.
listening to another edition of Boston Public Radio. Thanks to everybody who came down to the Boston
Thank you
Public
all. We
Library.
appreciate
really
it.
appreciate your coming down here. You can keep up with us 24/7 by way of our podcast, or check out our TikTok page. By the way, Jim was looking at it again last night. We have a great
Nicole does it.
TikTok
It's
page.
fabulous.
Thanks to
It's
Nicole.
great.
So thank you, Nicole.
At Boston Public Radio.
That is it. TikTok page at Boston Public Radio. Tomorrow we're going to be joined by political analyst Chuck Todd, former Massachusetts Secretary of Public Safety Andrew Cabral, the NAACP's Michael Curry, and our food policy analyst Corby Cummer. We want to thank our crew, Zoe Matthews, Aidan Comley, Nicole Garcia, Hannah Loss. Additional support from Nia Harmon. Our engineer is John the Claw Parker. Our executive producer is Jane Bologna. Special thanks to the staff here at the Boston Public Library, Brad Lewis, Bill Francis, Juan Jose Cadena, and thanks as well to our folks at the Newsfeed Cafe and across the street at the Lenox Hotel. Another edition of The Culture Show is going to start with Jared Bowen right after us here at 89.7 GBH. Anything you'd like to say before we go, Jim?
Have a nice night.
Have a nice night. Okay.
See you tomorrow.
I'm Marjorie Egan.
I'm Jim Browdy.
Thanks again for tuning in. I hope you can tune in tomorrow. It looks like it's gorgeous outside, so I hope you have a wonderful afternoon.